oval races, Indianapolis and Daytona, to name a few. But today, we take the cars of the past and put them out on one of the most historic circuits in North America and let them run for 500 miles. Welcome, everyone, to the Dirty Toy Racing League's Road America 500 live here on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hi, my name is DJ Clark, and with me here in the booth is Cameron Dance. Behind the scenes is our director, Robert O'Brien, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. While Road America may be a staple on the American racing calendar, for those of you unfamiliar, let's head over to our GSRC track guide for a brief refresher.
Welcome to Road America. Nicknamed America's National Park of Speed, it's easy to see why just by looking at how the track is laid out. Long straights are a major feature, and drivers will build up incredible momentum before they find themselves interrupted by tight 90-degree corners. In fact, for a 4-mile circuit, it has shockingly few turns. It also has little in the way of variation in layouts. The main course is only broken up once with a single chicane added in the bend version. But don't take this to mean that it's a boring track. Elevation change happens many times over a lap, with a few places taking you into corners which are quite blind. But two of the turns on the back half of the course are perhaps the most distinctive. One is the carousel with its more than 180-degree radius. It just feels like it never stops. The other is the kink. Terrifyingly fast with very little runoff, it can end someone's race in a flash. As you'd expect, the heavy braking zones make for some ideal overtaking spots. Turn 5 sees plenty with its downhill entry. The hurried downs can offer drivers a chance at a sneak attack if you're brave, and then Canada Corner gives you one last shot before the lap is over. It's no wonder major organizations such as IMSA, IndyCar, NASCAR, and the SCCA all host major races here. All in all, many drivers rate this track as the best track in North America. Many who hop in the seat and try it can quickly understand why.
Well, Cameron, that's a bit of an overview around this historic circuit, but how are these GTPs and GTOs going to take to this Road America track?
Yeah, they're usually very, very quick around here, especially for how old they are. I mean, for the GTPs at least, it's a very, very quick lap, and it's generally a very quick set of corners as well, with the fact it's only 14 corners, and it is 6.5 kilometers long. But that said, it's absolutely rapid in these rocket ships that are GTPs and also GTOs. So it's going to be very, very fascinating to see what today is going to be like. It's obviously quite warm out there, but yeah, looking like it's going to be a very, very good race.
I know I, for one, can't wait for it, and we are in the midst right now of qualifying for today's event. It is going to be 500 miles, roughly about 78 or so laps out there. Open setup for these cars and no spare car for these drivers. So if you make a mistake, you have to live with it. You can drive through at 20 incidents, and that will repeat from there on out. As I said, this 78-lap race we are in the midst of qualifying for right now, and it is the GTPs that are out on track tearing it up and trying to see what they can do. The GTOs have already gone out to qualify. Phil Lake currently at the top of those charts right now, holding down a 26.8 and just waiting to see what, to use your words, Cameron, the rocket ships that are the GTPs can do.
Yeah, it'll be very, very fascinating to see what sort of qualifying times we're going to see from the GTP class. Obviously, a lot quicker than what the GTOs are, with a lot more horsepower and obviously a lot more downforce as well. So it'll be fascinating to see what we're going to be seeing as far as lap times go. It is a little bit warmer, obviously, than what practice was now, with about a 50-degree track at the moment. So it is very, very warm and slippy and slidey out there for these drivers, but I'm sure they'll be able to handle the conditions, as they say.
I'm sure they will as well. And before we get to those conditions out on track, we want to thank our sponsor for the channel here, and that is the Majors Garage. Make sure to check out the Majors Garage, home of free Baseline Plus setups. Get help from any of the garage coaches 24/7. Sign up for awesome, affordable monthly subscriptions, telemetry, coaching, and more by simply clicking on the link in the description below. Also, if you use our special discount code MajorsGSRC, you will get 10% off. And as I said, those GTPs out on track right now, getting that qualifying done. And Cameron, I've got to be a little bit interested here. With this being a 500-mile race around this, we may see some pit stops. Well, we're obviously going to see some pit stops, but I'm starting to wonder a little about tire wear in both of these classes.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what tyre wear's going to be like, whether we're going to see drivers maybe trying to double stint tyres just to try and get a little bit of an extra advantage, or whether we're going to see everybody sort of run the same sort of strategy of just pitting for tyres at each individual stop. Obviously, the hot conditions of a 50-degree track is really going to bring tyre wear into it massively, especially if you start abusing them later on in the stint. So it's going to be really critical to looking after your tyres, especially if you can make it so you don't have to take a set of tyres in your pit stop.
Yeah, exactly. That can be a huge help. And as those GTPs continue to qualify right now, it is Togo Hasada on the top of the charts to the tune of about 0.4 of a second right now. Some pretty big gaps starting to form, and not exactly surprising given the length of this lap. There is plenty of time to gain or lose around here. So very, very wide open track, as you said earlier, Cameron. These cars do come at it fast, but it is challenging. Pretty much every single one of these corners presenting its own unique difference, its own unique challenge to these drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to remember as well is not only is this track very quick and obviously having a few corners that are quite a challenge for both cars, also the multi-class factor is going to really play into effect here, especially with the differences in where each car makes its own speed. Obviously you got that massive amount of downforce on the GTP cars, whereas the Audi not quite able to stay planted to the road and use its ability to get around the corners just as well, so the likes of the carousel or the kink and that sort of stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see how people are going to manage traffic. Obviously making sure you don't run up the back of someone or end up in a little bit of a tangle is going to be very, very critical, and making sure you don't lose time is going to be very paramount. So it's going to be really all about keeping your head on your shoulders and making sure you don't get too flustered if you get held up a little bit.
Well, that seems to always be the case here in any time we run with these GTPs and GTOs. That traffic management always key. And even with the smaller field that we're looking at here, that is still going to be massive for these drivers to make sure that they know how to weave their way through. As you said, definitely some areas that it is easy to make that overtake going down through the Marine sweep, going down into turn 5, pretty easy. But once you get from there out, turn 6, all the way really down to the hurry downs, that's an area you don't want to be catching a car. You don't want to be catching one of those slower GTOs through the carousel, certainly not into the kink. It can really, really throw you off. As there you see on your screen, your pole sitter right now, provisional pole sitter, I should say, Togo Hasada. His last lap, by the way, able to bump him up to 0.5 of a second faster than Lost Olsen behind him.
Yeah, very, very solid lap there at the moment from Hasada to put himself in currently provisional P1 by a pretty solid margin, actually, half a second. So we'll be trying to keep that margin at that amount. We'll see what Olsen can do in his second lap, whether he's going to be able to improve in the rest of the session. Doesn't have too long left, so he's probably only going to get about, I'd say he's probably going to get 2 laps, but we'll see what happens whether he decides to only do 1 or not. We'll see, but it's very, very close between those two, and half a second is by no means massive around this sort of track. It's very, very easy to make that up as well, so still very, very close between those two.
Yeah, it very much is. We actually ride on board with Lost Olsen right now, the Scandinavian driver working his way through Camden Corner. That is going to be an overtaking area that we talk about over the course of this race. Lost bringing the car up through Bill Mitchell Bend, through that perilous final corner, and that always seems to catch me out a little bit, but Loust handling it very, very well, trying to go here. He's going to be on a slow lap, but if he can wing this all up together and get it to run, he's hopefully going to be able to challenge Togo here for that pole.
Yeah, he certainly will be hoping to try and challenge for that pole position. Last lap didn't quite count, so we'll see what he's going to be able to do this time on this lap, whether he's going to be able to improve it ever so slightly, or whether he's going to be able to put himself on pole. We'll be hoping to put it on pole, but we'll have to wait and see. Looking like it's been pretty clean first 2 corners so far, hasn't really shown any signs of struggle, so I'd say this probably is going to be a pretty solid lap if you can put the rest of it together.
I have to think it is. I'll have to look at some of the sector times they come across. He did go green there in the second microsector, so that's a good sign for Lost Olsen. Not particularly quick through the first sector, about 0.2 off of Togo Asada, who on this current lap that he's on went purple through that sector. Asada going purple again, so this may be a little bit interesting here. Togo Asada looking very, very quick.
Yeah, it's looking very, very quick according to what the sectors are showing us, so this could be an improvement and make it a little bit more difficult for Olsen to try and get on pole here if he can put the lap together. Although that said, it's still pretty good lap by Olsen so far, so we'll see what Asada can do in this lap. He's going to have some traffic as well just in front of him, so we get a little bit of a draft from Arabus just up in front of him. and hopefully he doesn't get held up. If he does, he won't be too happy, but this is certainly going to be helping him as far as a draft to get that little bit extra of top end down the straightaways.
And specifically coming down this long front straight, I think that'll be a big help here for Togo if he can get it. Still looking pretty good, tracking very, very well. Here's where that draft is really going to come into play. Waiting to see here if Togo's going to be able to improve on that 147.6. He crosses the line. He is 0.02 of a second faster. So that is going to be the fastest lap there by Togo Hasada. Behind him, Lost Olsen will cross over the line. He is able to go faster and bring that gap down to under 0.2 of a second, but not close enough to make it count.
Yeah, not quite enough to get onto pole, unfortunately. Still very, very close between those two. Actually kind of surprised that Hasada only went that much quicker than he did, especially with how much draft he got. So wondering if he just maybe made a mistake at some point in the lap, or maybe got a little bit too much dirty air through that final sector, not sure. But nevertheless, he is on pole, and he's going to be absolutely stoked with that.
Yes, he is. Checkered flag is in the air right now, so drivers look like they're going to be able to finish their fast laps here. That's Olsen is going to pull off to the side. Togo Hasada, though, doesn't look like he is stopping. He went purple again through Sector 1. Not as quick through Sector 2 and 3, but still faster than Olsen on his last lap. I think Togo here just starting to push a little bit for his own benefit.
Yeah, not really much more to gain other than trying to set himself a personal best at this stage. He knows he's going to have pole more than likely. There's no one else really who's challenged or shown any signs of challenging him for pole position at the moment, but we'll see regardless as to what this lap time's going to be when he crosses the line this time round.
Doesn't look particularly quick in those final sectors of the lap, but Togo could be able to pull one out here as he gets ready to go around the other drivers we're waiting on. I see third place Aitor Sintes Galindo able to cross over. He's able to improve there, but not enough to be able to bump him up. Ooh, Togo looking very squirrely there coming off that final corner.
Yeah, very crossed up, very sideways. I thought he might have actually got an off track from that, but as a result, that meant he's not improved, and he only went 0.3 slower as well, so no improvement there on his personal best of pole position.
All right, and that's going to take us to the grid here for today's race. As you've heard us talking about, it is Togo Hasada lining up in pole position for that GTP class. His outsider to be Lost Olsen with Aitor Sintes Galindo and Jay Dixon behind them in row 2. Hideki Kovisto will be in 5th with Christian Uribas in P6, and that will round out your field for the GTPs.
And you're going to feel like a Nicholas Mukanos on 4th row and 7th and 8th, the first row of the GTOs. And then you're going to have Sho Kantake and Matt Wright on row 5, the second row of the GTOs. And then we'll go over the page to Silver Yofest and Andrew Schumacher to round out the field.
And Grant Bristow there, one of those GTP drivers not setting a time. So it looks like he will grid up what is listed at the back of the field, but I believe he will actually be able to be in position with the rest of the GTPs. But we'll have to see full pace lap around here at Road America. And Cameron, talk me through the mindset of going into a 500-mile endurance race like this. This has got to be grueling, especially on a long pace lap like this. Just how do you keep yourself calmed down when you know you've got so much to wait for?
Yeah, it's very, very tense. Obviously, you're just thinking about the race ahead, more or less. You're just trying to think, what can I possibly do to try and have a nice, clean race? What do I need to do to try and win this race? If you're someone like Togo Hasada, you're just trying to think about how can I extract the maximum amount of pace out of this car to try and pull away from the field and pretty much just cruise to an easy victory. If you're someone like Loust Olsen or one of the other GTPs, you're thinking, what can I possibly do to stick with Togo or possibly those that head you and around you to try and out-strategize them if you don't have the outright pace. So it's going to be very, very fascinating to see what people do as far as strategies for the race, whether they decide to do a fuel saver, whether they decide to just go all-out pace for nothing, or what they just decide to do.
It's going to be fascinating, as you said. I think strategy going to be a big play. I'm personally very interested to see what these drivers decide to do with that tire strategy around here. And you saw their flash up at the top of the screen, 50 degrees Celsius, about 122 degrees track temperature. This is a hot circuit right now. This is a hot Road America, and I think that may sway the hand a little bit of these drivers as they start to think about their pit stop strategy.
And obviously pit stop strategy going to be very, very important as well, because of the fact that you're going to have to make sure that you're saving enough fuel that if you can get that extra lap, it's going to be very, very paramount to that very end stint as well, where you're not having to take so much fuel. And if you can not take so much fuel and put less pressure on the tires, you're really going to benefit from that later on. So we'll see what everybody's going to do, but making sure you're just getting a nice clean pit stop and having a strategy that's going to be very, very good for you in the long run is going to be key.
It certainly is, as drivers behind the iRacing pace car here working their way down the Marine sweep into turn 5. This is going to be one of the areas that we are going to be focusing on a lot during the course of the race. One of the better overtaking opportunities down into that corner. And then, of course, the course rises up here, up into turn 6, a very tricky uphill braking zone, and suddenly sort of flattens out there. Very easy to get the car sideways. Could be an area that we see some drivers run into a little bit of trouble. Could be some areas, especially when we get into lap traffic, that this could get a little bit hairy, and certainly a place that you don't want to be catching lap cars, as it can really slow you down.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if you're in that GTP class, because of the fact that you're having to slow up so much more, and this GTP car doesn't exactly take slow turns very well with the reliance on downforce and ground effects and everything. So you've really got to make sure that you're timing your passes right and just making sure that you're taking advantage of that traffic as well. If you're someone like Togo Hosada, if you can make your way through traffic and leave everybody behind in a position where they're going to have to check up at a corner where you're going to be well up the road, you're really going to benefit from that sort of stuff. So it's going to be all about just being patient with some of these GTOs and really being smart about what you do, and also using that to your advantage to fuel save as well if you can.
Most certainly, you can be able to fuel save a little bit behind him. Great view out the back there of I believe that's Togo Hosada's car. Yeah, you can see looking out the back as they get ready, coming down here through the kettle bottoms, down into another one of the crucial braking zones that we will be talking about, coming down into Canada Corner here. It's a deceptive corner, always seems to be a little bit faster than you want to take it, but all of these drivers obviously very well acquainted with it. Plenty of runoff there. That black rumble strips to the outside will certainly help it out. A little bit of gamesmanship there from Laust Olsen, I think, as drivers start to warm up the brakes a little bit, try to get ready for the start of this 500-mile race here at Road America. Coming through Bill Mitchell Bend are the GTPs right now, getting ready to get going here for the Dirty Torque Racing League's Road America 500. The pace car will pull off into the pits here, as indeed it does, giving control of the field over to Togo Hosada, getting ready for Borny to wave the green flag. Waiting again. Very slow start, but there goes the flag. We are racing in Road America. It is a brilliant start for Togo Hosada. Laust Olsen going to be able to slide in right behind him. A little bit of sideways there between Cintes Galindo and Jay Dixon, but they're going to slide into line as they make their way through turn 1. Everybody relatively single file and clean. We go back to the GTPs.
Yeah, clean start from the GTPs. GTO side by side, 2x2 on the way through turn 1. Clean start for them as well. Good start for Mykonos to take the lead of the GTO class at the moment. Justin behind Phil Lake, though. He'll be trying to make up another position after losing the lead on the way into turn 1. They're side by side in the background as well, just behind. But you can see all in a line, drafting each other, trying to use that slipstream to close up to the driver ahead. Currently top 3 making a little bit of a breakaway to the other 2, but so far it's very close as it gets very loose there on the way in.
Little bit of argy-bargy as they get down into the corner. Matt Wright able to work his way up into 4th place right now. He's going to try to hold that out as they all go single file here through the hurry downs and getting down into turn 8. Some good action back in that GTO category as Phil Lake, as you said, definitely a little bit on the back foot. Not what I would have expected here. He is a fixture in the Kamel GT series, and now he is trying to hound Nicholas Mukanos here as we ride on board with Mukanos, ride on board with Lake, going through the carousel and down into the King.
Yeah, so far it's been a very, very clean start for Lake. Nearly took a little bit too much inside curb there on the way through the kink, but so far it's so good for all the drivers so far. No real mistakes from anybody at all at the front of the GTO field or even the GTP. So far so good, and for Lake still maintaining that gap to Mukanos as well.
And just hearing that Laust Olsen has had a little bit of a mistake going down into Canada Corner. That has dropped him down to 4th place. A couple of drivers around him, Sintis Galindo and Jay Dixon, making a little bit of avoidance maneuvers. But they are able to keep going and keep pointed the right way. Doesn't look like a whole lot of damage on either of those cars, but already a little bit of incidents starting to creep their way in.
Yeah, not too ideal, especially this early on in a 78 lap race, a very, very long race, so you don't really want to be making mistakes this early on, but unfortunately some have made those errors, sadly, so already some claiming victim, and bearing in mind it's still very, very hot, so would not be surprised if this hot track is catching out a few people.
Yeah, it certainly can. As we watch here, this is Jay Dixon and Heitor Sintes Galindo as they work their way down into turn 8, going down into the carousel now. This is going to be Sintes Galindo trying to get a good little run. He's got to poke his nose out a little bit. That aero wash, while it can really help down the straights, when you get in through a fast corner like the carousel, it can throw you off, and you really have to adjust not only your steering, but your throttle inputs.
Yeah, absolutely. You just got to be nice and smooth. You really don't want to be throwing these things around. You can really unsettle the car very, very easily if you're not careful. So being smooth and very, very precise with your inputs is key to these things in either class, really, because of machines and monsters that you really don't want to be fighting with. As the battle for second in GTP reasonably close, actually. Galendo's made his way to the back of Jay Dixon and not doing too bad of a job here.
Not doing too bad of a job. Ran a little bit wide there, but we're going to jump back to Phil Lake right now as he continues to hound behind Nicholas Mukanos. Jay Dixon setting the fastest lap of the race, so good job there for him. And this is your top 3 in GTO. That is Mukanos, Lake, and Kaneki there behind him. So doing a good job to keep this nice and close. I'm getting the sense here that Lake doesn't necessarily want to go in full attack mode. He's waiting a little bit here at this moment.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's just being a little bit patient here. He's possibly trying to save some fuel, possibly just trying to bide his time, knowing that he's not probably got the outright pace at this stage, but also knows that if he's going to be smart here, he'll have a big advantage later on.
Yeah, gonna have to be smart about it, I think, is going to be the name of the game around here. Just trying to keep everything together. Phil Lake continuing to hound behind as they go down now into turn 3. And Cameron, we can have that eternal argument here of whether or not turn 2, as they call it here at Road America, constitutes a turn or not. But they're going to turn 3, and Lake getting a good draft here down the Moraine Sweep.
Yeah, it's got a very, very good run out of the proper turn 2, I guess you could say, on the way down towards turn 3. He had a good run. He actually didn't poke his nose out. I thought he might have to have a go at the lead, but deciding to just be a little bit patient and sit in behind. So Phil Lake being smart here and just using the draft of Mukanos to try and feel safe here.
As we've had another off. That was Jay Dixon off. That was your P2 car who was closing in on your leader, Togo Hasada. And unless I'm mistaken, there is some pretty hefty damage to that machine. Let's go back and check out the replay here, find out what happened to Dixon. This is coming down into Canada Corner.
Yeah, just coming on through, and it just looks like he's gassed it up a little bit too much, unfortunately. And, oh, that's a bang to the tyre wall, unfortunately, and damaged that right-hand side very heavily.
And remember, no spare cars in this race, so that is going to be almost fatal there for Dixon. He's going to have to limp that car around. Ooh, we've got side-by-side Lake trying to make that move.
Yeah, like trying to go around the outside at Canada corner. Is he going to be able to hold it on? Not quite, but he's managed to just do enough to have a little bit of overlap, but I don't know if he's going to press on. He is, and he's going to go side by side. He's going to be the inside for the following kink, but the inside is going to go to Mikados at the final corner, and Lake's not quite going to be able to hold around the outside, and as a result, he's going to have to back out and sit in behind. What this has allowed as well is it can take to get right up to the back of these guys. Now he's in for the lead.
Yes, he is. So this is now a three-way fight for the lead of GTO. But that is Lake trying to hold that again around the outside here, diving down into turn one. It's going to be a battle of the late breakers. It looks like Lake was a little bit later on the binders there, trying to carry that momentum around the outside of Mukanos. But Mukanos still not giving up the ghost. They're side by side again, going down into turn three. Lake's going to really have to send this if he wants to make it work. He is continuing to hold it out. Oh, a little bit of a wiggle there for Mukanos. That could be an opportunity for Lake.
Yeah, it's going to be Lake getting on by, and what this might do is even allow a Kanatak to get on by. He doesn't actually, he had a little bit of a run, but decided just to sit in behind Mukanos, and Mukanos looks to the inside, just pokes his nose out, but not quite close enough to get the move done. So change for the lead between Lake and Mukanos. So Lake resumes the former lead that he had.
And talk about an impressive sequence of corners. They're really asserting dominance is Phil Lake. They're going around it, but I don't think Mukanos is going to quite let him go quite easily. It is the UK&I driver versus the Californian here as they work their way up into turn 7 there, or excuse me, turn 6, now into turn 7. Mukanos definitely keeping this close as they work their way into the carousel now. You can see those varying lines from that helicopter shot. Ooh, Mukanos getting a good run mid-corner.
Yeah, very, very good mid-corner there, and might be able to do something here, but we'll see, as Jay Dixon is in the pit lane as well to get some repairs done. So he's brought that thing in to get that right-hand side repaired after it being a little bit battered and bruised. Lau Alston has also moved up a position. He's managed to get ahead of Galindo to get back into second place, so he'll be on the hunt for Hasada, who's not too far up the road.
And this is all precipitated by a little bit of a misjudge on the braking for Sintes Galindo. There you can see they go down into the corner. That sends Togo Hasada wide into the corner, and that's going to allow for Laust Olsen to get up on by. So just a misjudge in the braking. And Cameron, that's a downhill braking zone there into 5. It is an easier mistake to make than you would think.
Yeah, it's certainly a very, very easy mistake. Make a mistake in these things, especially with how much horsepower they have. So you got to be very, very easy on the throttle, especially with that turbo lag. So it's a little bit of an unfortunate incident, but it is what it is. And still, there's plenty of racing to go, so it's not completely over.
No, it is not, and it looks like Aitor here is able to keep up nice and close behind Laust Olsen, and kudos here to Olsen, partially because of that off that Togo Hasada had. It's allowed him to be able to keep relatively close to the drivers behind him. So Olsen not letting Togo Hasada slip off into the distance here. I thought with some of those qualifying times and with Jay Dixon out of it, that it may have given Togo a chance to scamper off into the distance, but that certainly doesn't look like it's the case.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't at all, and as a result, he's getting a little bit of a run for his money here, is Hasada. So Olsen and Galindo now working together somewhat. Galindo's not too far behind Olsen, and was certainly getting a draft off him, so they'll all be getting some form of draft here, apart from obviously Hasada, who's in the lead on his own, but they'll be closing that gap up ever so slightly each little lap. So if Hasada wants to get a little bit more clean air, need to get a move on.
Yeah, he certainly will, and it looks like Togo is a little bit better here through this middle portion of the track, really the tricky technical section. The corners almost, when you look at them from up above, that almost looks like a street track. It's a bunch of 90-degree corners flying at you, and then we work our way here into the carousel. Let's see if Togo's able to pull out a little bit more of a gap. He's already got it up to about 1.1 seconds as they work their way into the kink. Although they don't have all that far to go until they catch up to the back of this very tightly packed GTO field, so that's going to be another thing to set them off, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah, they're not too far away from hitting lap traffic of the GTO field. Only a couple of corners up the road, and obviously the pace differential as well means they're going to be lapping these guys reasonably soon, and also quite often as well. Obviously, about a 20 or so pace, 20 or so second pace differential between the two classes. So they're going to be coming up on lap traffic quite often. So they want to be making sure they're smart and not doing anything silly to hold themselves up.
Indeed, they're about one corner away there. You can see them as they work their way down into turn 3 right now, coming up behind Matt Wright and Silver Joffert there in P5 and 6 in class. So they are pretty much on the same straightaway here. Again, Togo Hasada losing time in the final sector and the first sectors of this lap, and then just starts to look like he can streak away. Very late on the binders there was Laust Olsen. Clearly, he feels a little bit better in that car. And Cameron, could that maybe be a little bit of a setup difference? Could Laust Olsen here be running a little bit more of a trimmed out setup and Togo Hasada favoring a little bit more of a downforce heavy setup, and that's what's allowing him to power through this middle sector?
It could very well be the difference. I mean, yeah, it's very, very hard to tell. Obviously, there's a reasonable amount you can do to these cars, but it wouldn't surprise me if Olsen's maybe just running a little bit more trimmed out than what Hasada is. And obviously, the downforce differentials would certainly be helping as Hasada gets through it nicely. And that was very close for Olsen and Galindo to get on through at the kink, but they've all come out the other side in one piece. So thankfully, no incidents between the multi-class just yet.
No incidents quite yet, as Togo Hasada is now going to be coming up behind the back there of Kanatake as they work their way through Bill Mitchell Bend. He's going to try to go around the outside here. Easy pass. I think the 208 just relatively happy to let him by. But again, Laust Olsen gets held up. That is 2 corners in a row pretty much that he has been held up by some slower GTP traffic through no fault, or GTO traffic through no fault of their own. Togo Hasada easily able to get it done there on the straights. I think Olsen may get a little bit held up here going down into the first corner. Yep, he's going to have to check himself up a little bit and to be able to get that crossover.
Yeah, just going to try and get on through these guys. They managed to get on through nicely. Not too much being held up, but they're going to want to try and follow each other through. Mukanos going to want to try and hold the lead off Lake. We'll see if Lake tries another move, this time into turn 3. He's getting closer and closer, sticks the nose out, goes for the inside on the way down towards turn 3, and that is going to be a move well and truly secured. Or is it? As Mukanos tries to go around the outside, but not quite, slots back in behind.
And I thought about trying to make that a little bit spicy, but not quite able to do it. I'm getting the sense that we're going to see these two duking it back and forth through the majority of the race, as Mukanos and Phil Lake looking very, very close together on pace. Coming up behind them right now, that's Jay Dixon. Remember, the heavy damage to the side of that car. He has been into pit lane to get that bang down. And then that is the 103 right there. Also coming by, that is Coivisto as he tries to navigate his way by the GTO leaders.
Yeah, he's certainly trying to get on by, no real drama there, but a little bit held up there on the way through was Jay Dixon. Didn't quite get a clean run through the kink, had to back off a little bit just so he didn't run into the back of the GTO leaders, but he's managed to make it on through. But these guys, you can't separate them at all in their GTO class. They've just been stuck together.
Yeah, they certainly have. Mukanos doing a fantastic job of keeping the pressure up onto Phil Lake here as they dive down into that final corner. And here the draft is going to come to the benefit of Mukanos as they work their way up the hill. Now that is Kanatake behind them, trying to close in to the best of his ability. He's losing a little bit of time, but he's only about 1.2 seconds behind, so he's not going to be that far off. Ooh, Mukanos very close. Doesn't decide to go for a move into turn 1, but he is threatening.
Yeah, certainly threatening, sitting on the back bumper there. These two really aren't going to leave each other alone all race, I reckon. I imagine that someone's going to have to give, because at some point they're going to have to pit, and at some point someone's going to have to make a strategy call on, do you pit early and decide to just get the pit stop out of the way, or do you try and do a little bit of fuel saving here to try and extend it and make it a quicker pit stop? It'll be very, very fascinating to see what happens between these two in the pits.
I think it certainly will. And Mukanos there didn't look like he was doing a whole lot of fuel saving. He certainly was just keeping that GTO right behind the the 000 or 001 rather of Phil Lake, and just keeping the pressure up. It didn't look like he was backing off all that much. So it may be fuel saving. Whoa, again, very late onto the binders there is Mukanos, and so he clearly has pace in that car, and I think wants to try to get on by.
Yeah, he certainly has a reasonable amount of pace and wants to lead this race, but I don't know if he actually does, because he's going to have a nice bit of draft here and he's going to be able to fuel save, although he hasn't really shown signs of doing that just yet. But it's very, very close between these guys, and obviously Mukanos feeling very, very racy and wanting to lead this race.
Pokes his nose this way and that, going through the kettle bottoms. Going to take a little bit of a wider line there, going down into Canada corner to see if he's able to get anything at all. Lake's going to be able to pull out a little bit more of a gap. It's about 0.3 of a second as of right now. Both clip the curbing coming through Bill Mitchell Bend and break their way down into the final corner. Tricky there to get the power down just right, but both drivers handle it perfectly. Mukanos losing a little bit of time, but he starts to gain it back here in the draft.
Yeah, and you're going to see him start to gain it back as well as they hit about halfway down the straight, closing and closing, but decides to lift out of it there. Didn't quite decide to persist on with applying the pressure, so is maybe deciding to start thinking about this in the long run, starting to do a little bit of fuel saving maybe at this stage, knowing that he's not quite going to be able to get a breakaway.
Exactly. That may be what he's thinking here at this point, to be able to try to do that. He definitely did lift there. I've been keeping an eye on him to try to see if he's lifting at other points. Doesn't look like, no, he's lifting a little bit coming down through the Moraine sweep as well. So I think fuel saving starting to get onto the mind of Nicholas Mukanos.
Yeah, and I think Phil Lake's sort of doing it as well in front of Mukanos, not quite to the same extent, but is just sort of lifting off slightly earlier than what he might typically do, just to try and save a little bit of fuel, try and get himself on a similar sort of strategy and minimize that time loss that he might have in the pit lane. So the two GTO leaders are doing a bit of cat and mouse at the moment as far as a pit stop strategy goes. Meanwhile, in the GTP field, Olsen closing down on Galindo at the moment, and not doing too bad, although I must say something has not quite happened to the race leader, my mistake, but still Olsen not quite able to close up enough to Galindo at the moment, and it was about a second or so pace differential between them on that last lap as well, so not quite sure what happened there, but maybe a bit of fuel saving.
Well, I think part of it was that Olsen was overtaken going down into Canada corner. I caught that out of the corner of my eye. A big move for Galindo to be able to send that down there, and Olsen just trying to catch back up. And, you know, we've seen Olsen make a couple of mistakes here. And Cameron, when you get into that position, you get overtaken, you've made a mistake, how do you get your mind sort of reset and refocused to be able to keep going ahead and keep pushing ahead the way you'd like to?
Yeah, it's a very, very hard one. I mean, everybody's got their own sort of ideas on how to get refocused. It's very, very hard to do, especially if you make a mistake and lose the draft or make a big mistake that you really didn't want to do. It's very, very hard to get back into that mindset, but you've just got to think about, especially if it's a long race like this, that there's still plenty of racing to go. There's still plenty of time to make up that time that you've lost, and then you've got to also think about, how can I actually make up that time without losing more time, such as through maybe fuel saving or running a different strategy to avoid getting held up by traffic or something like that, just to try and give yourself some time to get back into that mindset of being able to push and continually push at the pace that you would have typically had.
Well, that is, I think, exactly here what Lars Olsen's going to have to do, because Heitor Sintes Galindo starting to pull away here. The Iberian driver really getting a good move on, as he has now been able to pull out a gap of about a second, and that should be out of the effective draft range. We jump back to that battle for P1 in the GTO field. Phil Lake just holding a narrow advantage over Mukanos. I was listening to him earlier, still doing a little bit of listening, so here Nicholas Mukanos still thinking about the long game over the course of this race.
Yeah, he's absolutely being smart here and using his smarts to his advantage to try and outwit the race leader at the moment. They aren't really losing time either to those behind, so they're not by any means holding each other up or anything like that. So I don't think there's going to be anything that they need to do to try and keep on pulling away from the rest of the field. They're just got to keep on working together and not really hold each other up, or they're going to have the problem of where it's going to turn back into a three-way fight with Kanatake ending up back on them.
Yeah, and that's what they've got to be careful about there. A little bit different lines coming through that final corner. This could be an opportunity for Mykonos. I think he was able to carry a little bit more speed, a little bit more momentum through that final corner. And indeed, he's going to poke his nose to the inside here of Phil Lake as they go down the main straightaway here at Road America. Trying to see if there's a little bit of a move. He's going to poke his nose back into line, not wanting to go for it there. Maybe just trying to see if he could scare Phil Lake off of that optimal line, force a mistake out of the driver of the 000 or 001.
Yeah, maybe trying to force a mistake, maybe just trying to remind Phil Lake that, hey, I'm here, I'm still ready to pounce whenever I need to, so you better not make a mistake. So we'll see how they're going to keep on going, but he's certainly looking very, very racy and not letting up at all as Mykonos.
No, he is not. Keeping that number 50 right behind the 001, just really hounding his tire tracks around this entire lap. You see a little bit of earlier braking there from Mykonos. I think that's just a little bit of a preventative measure going through the very, very tricky turn 6, as we've mentioned. He's able to carry a little bit more speed there through 7 as now they work their way down into the hurry downs of turn 8. Very closely pitched battle. These cars just looking almost identical in handling to one another. Little bit of differing lines there going through the carousel, but as we've said, that may be just trying to break off the aero wash, because even in these Audi GTOs, still aerodynamics being generated, and you still got to think about that aero wash as you make your way through the higher speed corners.
Yeah, trying to get a little bit of clean air on the front splitter and the rear wing as well. Very, very critical in both classes, really, even in the GTO, which is almost a brick on wheels, I guess you could say, but still looking very, very close at the moment as Mykonos, not letting up at all, even with different lines, and just trying to avoid the dirty air as best as he possibly can.
Yeah, trying to do it. Lake, I've got to give him credit. He's not really driving defensive. He's leaving the door open in some of these ideal passing zones. You don't see him weaving down the front straight necessarily, trying to break the draft or anything like that. He's kind of telling Mykonos, if you want this, you can have it. Go ahead. And Mykonos just pretty happy to stay in line here and not do anything too crazy.
Yeah, still continuing to be patient, not really make any sort of big moves or anything, just sitting stationed at the moment, being patient, being smooth, and looking after the car as best as he can at the moment to try and put himself in a good position later on. Still a little bit of fuel saving going on, not really a heat, but still just enough, probably just enough so he needs to get ahead, but still going to be very, very close between these guys. And then again, it's going to be fascinating to see what they do in the pit stop, whether they decide to take tyres in their stops or whether they decide to just go and put new tyres on. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens.
It will indeed. As we jump back up to that battle in GTP, this is the battle for P2 with Heitor Sintes Galindo and Laust Olsen still remaining close to each other. Remember, Olsen overtaken a couple of laps going down into Canada corner, and Sintes Galindo has done a very good job of just keeping up the pace, but Olsen here has also done an equally good job of not letting that gap expand too much, being able to keep that number 11 machine in his sights and crucially staying within that draft range.
It didn't look like he was going to fall off the back some laps ago, did it out Olsen, with the fact he lacked a little pace. He was doing 51s compared to the 50s consistently that Sintes Galindo was doing not too long ago, but he's picked up the pace now and is getting it back on pace with the car ahead. So not quite sure what was going on, whether it was just fuel saving or maybe some possible mistakes, but nevertheless he's back on pace at least, and he's going to be looking to try and close down as they once again become through traffic.
Yeah, but that is still a chauffeur that they are working their way on by right there, and they have closed down the gap a little bit to Togo Hasada. That gap has come down. It was about 3 seconds. It's now down to under 2 seconds now. 1.8 is Togo's having to catch a little bit of bad traffic there. That was Matt Wright that he had to work his way behind going through Canada Corner. I think that slowed him down a little bit.
Yeah, I think it might have just held him up slightly and just enough as well in over the course of that end of that last lap. So it's meant that gap has calmed down, but still he's got a lot of pace under him at the moment, does Hosada. So I wouldn't imagine it would be hard for him to start pulling away again, but we'll see what happens. Maybe there's some sort of tricks that the boys behind and Olsen and Galindo have got under their cars to just be a little bit better at the end of the stint on low fuel and old tyres.
Yeah, indeed. There they work their way by some more of those GTOs. Oh, I think that's going to catch out Togo just a little bit as they go down into turn 5. He had to take an alternate line. And indeed, the gap coming down to about 1.5 seconds. So this has got to be starting to think about push time here for Togo Hosada. He has really start to try to get on it. He is going to have Sintes Galindo and Laust Olsen all up behind him if he is not careful here soon.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to have to start pushing on a little bit harder at this stage, try and see if he can extract a little bit of pace out of that car if he hasn't already, and also put himself in a very, very good position. They're not going to get held up by traffic, are the leaders this time through the kink, although Olsen is, unfortunately, and that's going to hurt him really bad as he's now lost a massive amount of time to the lead pack.
Yeah, that was a big check up there for Laust Olsen, having to get behind those two leaders in the GTO category through the kink. They're able to keep battling on, but Olsen losing a whole bucket load of time, about 1.2 seconds to where he was behind Sintes Galindo before. Sintes Galindo now, everybody running in a little bit of their own race, just out of draft range of one another. So this is really going to come down to outright pace. Let's see what those lap times were as they cross over. Togo Hosada able to run a 51.8. It looks like Sintes Galindo a 51.88, so only about 0.08 of a second slower.
Yeah, not much in it between the top two at the moment. Then you compare that to Laust Olsen, who got held up at the kink, and that cost him quite a lot of time because he only did 1 minute 52.7, so nearly a whole second lost just from one corner.
That just goes to show you how crucial traffic management really and truly is around here. You have got to be absolutely on it. We see here those gaps just holding station a little bit as they go around up through turn 6. The number 11 trying to claw back a little bit more. He looked like he was quicker through the first sector, lost a little bit of time in the second. And then in the third sector, dead even with Togo Hosada. I can tell you, though, Laust Olsen was quicker in all 3 first microsectors, so he is very clearly pushing, does not want to lose anything from the back of the 11 or the 54.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think at this stage, if you're someone like Galindo, you've possibly got to start weighing up your options now that we're quite a ways into a stint at least. What do you think about doing at the pit stop? Do you maybe decide if you can double stint tyres? Do you think if you maybe need to, you put on new tyres and maybe do something different? Maybe you try and not change tyres. I mean, that's probably not an option, but we'll see what they do, because it's going to be very, very fascinating to see what those behind might possibly do. Do they short fuel? Do they full fuel? Who knows? It's really going to come down to whether they've got the outright pace or not to try and get to the back of Togo Hosada. They were actually quicker that last time by as well.
Yeah, they were. He was able to get that down. Galindo was able to get that time down to about 1 second here, so he will pick up a little bit of whiff of the draft if he's able to get a good exit here out of turn 3. Will that number 11 machine, and indeed that gap is coming down to about 0.8 of a second. So Heitor Sintes Galindo really, really on it. We jump back to the battle for GTO right now. Nicholas Mukanos continuing to stalk behind Phil Lake, not letting that 001 get away from him.
Yeah, they're still not separated at all over the last 15 laps. I don't think we've seen them not this close over the last 15 laps. It's been nose to tail for them pretty much the entire race so far. So we'll be surprised if they end up nose to tail on the pit exit as well, and probably in a slightly different position probably swapped around, but we'll see what's going to happen.
Yeah, we will, and see them on pit exit. I wouldn't be surprised at the end of these 500 miles if we see them this close at the end of the race the way they're running right now. It just seems like the two of them cannot separate from one another if their life depends on it. Nicholas Mukanos doing a great job of just hassling Phil Lake here. I think that's the operative word to use, just hassling him, keeping that rear view mirror of the 001 absolutely filled.
Makes you wonder if he's put a tow hook onto the back bumper and it's just getting towed along, because they have not separated. There's absolutely nothing in it between them in terms of outright pace. They're just sticking with each other, and that gap has just been maintained the entire way through this race. It's obviously gotten closer in a few occasions, but other than that, it hasn't really gotten beyond what we're currently seeing on screen at the moment between these two.
No, I think your assessment of a tow hook is probably right there, as it just looks like there is no way to separate them. Even if you wanted to, you couldn't separate them out here at this point. You see just the dab of the brakes there coming up through Bill Mitchell Bend for both drivers. Down into that final corner, the flames spitting out the side of the Audi, as this is one of its trademarks, as it shifts up and down through that manual gearbox. Very, very tricky. Again, Mukanos in that draft. He may have the speed if he wants it, but it sounds like he is lifting. He is doing a whole lot of fuel saving here.
Yeah, he's probably got to the point where it's no real point trying to push at this stage. He's really fuel saving massively compared to what he was a few laps ago. He knows that he's probably going to jump him at some stage, and it's probably going to be the only way to get by him and have a bit of a gap as well, maybe. So he's running a bit of a pit strategic race at this stage, not really trying to run this based on pure pace, but rather what's going to happen in the pit lane.
Well, if you're Phil Lake in this position, what can you do to counter that? I mean, you've got to know that Mukanos is saving fuel behind you, doing all of those kind of things. If you're Phil Lake, what can you do to try to save a little bit of fuel? You're not going to have the benefit of the draft to work with. Are you just kind of a sitting duck at this point?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because you've got pretty much, well, you've got kind of two options. One you probably don't want to do, but there are ways around it. One's make a mistake and let him on through. The other is just try and push on as hard as you can and try and possibly back him up if you can. Obviously, they've got a reasonable gap to P3 and the rest of the field as well, so they wouldn't be losing a massive amount if they ended up slowing up massively. But at the same time, you kind of don't want to slow up too much to the point where you're almost crawling around the track and holding yourself up. So it's, yeah, a very, very, very sticky situation that you want to be in if you're in Phil Lake's driver's seat at the moment.
Yeah, it's certainly it's tough, and you've got to be doing all of that while trying to keep that number 50 machine out of your brain as much as possible. I know that is something that is incredibly difficult to do, trying to keep that at bay. Thinking about it, we are about 34 minutes into this race, working on lap 19. It is the quarter mark of the race. We anticipate pit stops probably firing off, I would say, within about the next 20 minutes or so is when we would see drivers start to thinking about coming in.
Yes, it wouldn't surprise me if they just continue to fuel. So from here on out, these guys in the Audis, and just see what they can do as far as a pit stop strategy. Maybe get an extra lap, maybe even two if they can save enough. It's probably going to be a bit of a push to get to, but we'll see what they can do. But you can see Phil Lake maybe trying to break the draft a little bit there, but at the same time closing right back up to the back bumper is Mukanos, and is just sitting there with no real throttle percentage and at all, fuel saving massively. So he's going to be having a massive advantage in the pit stop. And bear in mind, this may come back to bite him as well, because Phil Lake's going to end up behind him at this rate in the pit stop. So Lake's going to end up the beneficiary with the fact he's going to end up with the shorter final stop.
Very good point. Lake can return the favor in that second stint, and if that happens, that may not be the position you want to be in. You get into a little bit of well, frankly, it seems like oval racing where you've got to be counting backwards as it goes around. And obviously, no full course yellow is being thrown here at Road America. So it's not like you can bank on that to be able to save fuel and jump anybody in the stints. But Lake will certainly know that, and that may be part of it. You see a little bit of a dab of the brakes there going through the kink for both Lake and Mukanos. These GTOs not quite able to take it at full tilt. A little bit of a poke to the inside there for Mukanos, but he's not really going for a move, I think.
Yeah, not really deciding on a move at this stage, just trying to fill the mirrors, as they say, and trying to keep the driver ahead at concentration level. Deciding to go a little bit wider through the final corner as well. A very interesting line there to try and maybe set up a run down the front straight. It's going to pull to the inside, so we might actually see a move happen, and that's happened, I want to say, a little bit easily, as I wonder if maybe Phil Lake's let him on by there and done that intentionally, and he's backed right off as well on the way into the braking zone. So change of position for the lead, and I'd say these two have done a swap.
I would say that they would as well, and now this is going to put Phil Lake into a position to be able to do a little bit of that fuel saving, a little bit of holding on to that fuel cycle, as he is now going to be in the catbird seat, able to back off a little bit and try to save as much fuel as possible. And by the way, from them back to Kenatake, it is about 5.5 seconds. So while these two have been battling, they have continued to pull away from the rest of the GTO field.
Yeah, they certainly have continued to pull away, and especially when you compare the pace that they've had over the course of the race so far. They've been doing sort of 50s, 51s in terms of pace. The others not really able to do similar pace. They've been doing 51s or maybe even 52s, closer to that, around for the rest their stint so far. So we've got some massive pace compared to everybody else, and are just using it to their advantage.
Yes, they are, and it's paying great dividends. And when you get into a battle like this where you're able to be ahead, you're able to not really have to worry about anybody behind you, is, I dare say, though, it looks like that is Mukanos dropping a little bit. It looks like Lake is losing a little bit of time.
Yeah, that was a very, very odd situation. Quite sure what was going on there, but yeah, very, very odd little situation there. He definitely sort of backed it up a little bit, but still very, very close between them. As the GTPs also quite close, and again through the kink, Olsen's going to get a little bit held up. That was very, very close.
And that was Lost Olsen there, not wanting to lose any more time to Galindo up ahead of him, really trying to push as much as he can. You can see it's getting to be a little bit now or never time. Togo Hasada has been able to pull that gap back out to about 3 seconds between himself and Galindo. He has been quicker on the last lap to the tune of about a second, and he looks to be quicker again here on this latest lap. But Lost Olsen, meanwhile, has been able to close in, I think, as they cross over the line. Let's see, he was about 1.5 tenths faster than Sintes Galindo on that last lap, so certainly trying to keep that gap as small as possible.
Yeah, they'll be certainly trying to keep up with Galindo's not too far up the road. He'll be trying to catch him mostly, but also trying to keep up as well, so he doesn't lose the draft or the lead at pack for that matter, as that'll be the last thing he wants to do, especially with the fact he started second on the grid. So he'll be pushing hard here over these next few laps to close that gap down. The pace between the two of them isn't massive, and also massively fuel saving on the way into turn 3. They're actually both of them doing that, so maybe short on fuel here for the extra lap maybe, but it's certainly a lot of fuel saving going on between those two.
Yeah, a lot of fuel saving as we continue to watch them here. That gap now down very, very close. It is under a second, 0.3, as that was Sintes Galindo held up a little bit by Matt Wright, and that is going to open up a little bit of an opportunity here for Lost Olsen, and one that I'm sure he is going to be very happy to have happen, as he is able to get close behind. But that arrow wash through the carousel, throwing off that 37 a little bit, he drops a little bit of time.
Yeah, he's dropped some time as a result of being held up there, but still very, very close between them and Olsen, and that's he's just blown on past him like he's standing still. I'm not quite sure what's happened there, whether Galindo's purposely done that, but they were both heavily fuel saving, and as a result, Olsen's just managed to fly on past.
Yeah, just passed him like he was standing still. We go back here to check out the GSRC replay. It almost looked like that was just of a lift and a let go there for Galindo, as he just kind of read the writing on the wall, knew he didn't have the exit. Yeah, he put the clutch in, so he was very clearly wanting to let Olsen on by.
Yeah, very interesting move there by Galindo to just make that decision. I'm not quite sure why he'd give up so much time, but we'll see whether that was going to be a good move or not as they head further and further into this stint, when the Olsen's actually got some pace to possibly catch the leaders, as he's going to get held up a bit here on the way into turn 3 with the GTO leaders and also a prototype as well. So he's going to get these guys are going to get some sort of an advantage, but not too much.
That was a big checkup in front from Togo Hasada. That gap massively coming down as he tries to work his way through the leaders. Now he has got to get a move on. Togo Hasada, big checkup through the twisty bits. He is now going to be able to pull ahead, but Laust Olsen within a second of the leader. This is the closest we've seen them in a while, and now they've got something else to deal with. That is Grant Bristow directly ahead of them. That is a lapped car in class.
Yeah, and I don't think these guys expected to be lapping their own class so early on, but Olsen really close now, maybe looking for a move on the lead here, but not quite close enough to make it happen on the way down through Canada Corner, so going to be just in behind, but he's really close now and really on for a challenge of the lead here if he can keep it clean and not make any mistakes.
It certainly seems like in the latter part of this stint, Laust Olsen has come alive. Maybe that car's set up a little bit for lighter fuel running. He's got the gap down to under 0.4 of a second right now as they go down this long start-finish straight. Olsen has the gap under 2. He lifts. It looks like he is lifting a little bit there, lifting and coasting. So not necessarily wanting to make the overtake, but certainly wants to be in position for it, at least if nothing else.
Yeah, and trying to use the draft that he's got from Hisada as well to his advantage to try and fuel save a bit more instead of being in clean air when he does it. We'll see whether he's going to lift this time. Either of them are going to lift. They both do on the way down towards turn 3, and you can see Olsen so much quicker into the corner and so much later on the brakes as well, despite the fuel savings. So Olsen, a little bit different fuel saving strategy here maybe, and also a lot better pace on the brakes as well.
Well, remember, we were denied a little bit of this battle courtesy of that opening lap incident that Laust Olsen made. It made him sort of tumble down through the field, and this is the battle that we were wanting to see between Olsen and Hasada. They were very close in qualifying, very equal measured in pace, and now that Olsen has been able to catch back up to Togo Hasada, that battle certainly not disappointing. Let's take a look here as they fly their way through the kink. I wonder if they're going to be doing some fuel saving again as they come down into Canada Corner.
Yeah, and they both lift once again on the way down towards Canada Corner, so both of them fuel saving once again and just continuing to try and extend their stint as long as they can.
Trying to extend that out. We are probably about, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes away from pit stops starting to fire off here. It's just going to depend on who has been the lightest on fuel. Thus far, the only drivers to have come down pit lane are Dixon and Arribas, and both of them have come down for damage-related issues. Very early onto the brakes there for Togo Hasada. Almost looked like he was trying to check up Laust Olsen, even though I know that is not the case.
Yeah, it sort of did look like that with the way the approach speed was for Olsen there, but nevertheless they continue on. It's still fuel saving, still trying to extend the stint out, and not really much has changed in that gap. I want to say Olsen's maybe lost a bit of time, but he's gaining it back in various different places. So both running different sort of pitch setups as in regards to aero, so possibly a little bit less aero on Olsen's car, so not quite able to make up for it in the middle sector, but he certainly makes up for it in a straight line.
And we have had the first, what we believe to be scheduled pit stop firing off here. Hideki Koivisto coming down pit lane. And would you look at that? He is going to opt to take tires here. So that seems to be the first warning shot over the bow. Koivisto taking tires on this pit stop.
Yeah, so fascinating to see the first round of pit stops for the GTPs taking tyres. Maybe the tyre wear a little bit too excessive for a double stint, but nevertheless, they're taking tyres, and it's probably going to be similar to what everybody else is going to do.
I would have to think so, as that is a long time in pit lane to be taking fuel and tires, but it looks like here he's about ready to get going. They may lose about a lap as they come down. 116 degrees Fahrenheit, about 47 Celsius. And here comes Togo Hisada coming down pit lane, your leader coming into the pits.
Yeah, so the race leader onto the lane as Olsen stays out, so that fuel saving really helping him, and obviously being the draft as well further back in the field, while Casada out in that clean air has burnt a little bit too much fuel to go the extra lap. So we'll see how this is going to affect Olsen's position, whether he's going to end up coming out in second or whether he's going to end up coming out in first with a little bit of a buffer. We'll see what happens, but it's going to be very, very fascinating to see what happens in regards to the pit strategy. Hisada takes tyres, so getting those out of the way.
All right, so it looks like a double stint not on the cards here, as the preferred strategy will be to take tires as they work their way around. We focus now on your leader, Laust Olsen, who has inherited the lead from Hisada, who is down into pit lane. I can also tell you that Taiki Miyamoto has also come down. It looks like they are actually switching that car out. Excuse me. Remember, we can have driver swaps here, so Taiki Miyamoto will be taking over for Togo Hisada in that 54 machine.
Still stationary, waiting for the rest of the fuel to go in, and he is finally away, so managed to make a clean, nice pit stop. It's going to come out in a little bit of traffic. Well, it's going to have at least one GTO to deal with, but other than that, it is in clean air for the most parts. So it's going to be fascinating to see where Olsen's going to come out in relation to the former race leader, as GTO's reasonably close, and Lake sort of lost a little bit of time here.
Yeah, Lake has lost some time. I think that was courtesy of traffic, as Olsen is going to come down pit lane here, as is Sintes Galindo. And now with this driver change there from Togo Hisada to Taiki Miyamoto, that is going to change things up. That is going to change the strategy. That'll change the calculus. Will Miyamoto be fast enough to be able to do it? We will have to find out here. This really does change everything with the new driver getting in that car.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It completely changes what we're going to be expecting maybe from that car in the second stint at least, and maybe even the rest of the race, as to whether he's going to have the pace to keep up with Olsen and also Sintes Galindo, as both are staying in the car. So no driver change in those cars at this stage, at least in the race. So we'll see what's going to happen here. But Miyamoto just coming up to Canada Corner now, and these guys still sitting in pit lane.
Just waiting for the last drops of fuel to be put in. We continue to focus on Phil Lake, trying to gain back that position, that time that he lost to Mecanos through traffic, as that battle for GTO has finally separated out, or GTP has finally separated out just a little bit there, as we hoped that it would. Looks like here that Laust Olsen is out and moving, waiting for Miyamoto to come across. He's crossing the start-finish line. Olsen will take the lead back of the race. Looks like it's going to be a drag race between Miyamoto and Sintes Galindo, but Miyamoto will hold on to second for the GTPs.
Yeah, and a big gap as well for Olsen. He's got a solid lead now after that fuel saving that he managed to do across the later part of that stint. So he's got a nice little buffer going at the moment, and still continues to fuel save straight out of the pits as well on his outlaps. So these guys are being very, very smart, and ran a little bit deep as well and onto the runoff pavement. But Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what Miyamoto has got as far as pace has. Whether he can keep up with Olsen or maybe even be quicker than Galindo. It's going to be fascinating to see.
Certainly will, and I'll tell you who has been able to keep up. That is Phil Lake. He has been able to get that gap down to Nicholas Mukanos. It was hovering at about a second and a half. It now sits at about 0.6 of a second. So he is now going to be able to be in that draft range, take advantage of that draft, be able to sip the fuel a little bit lighter, and that is going to be a huge boon to him. And it shows you just how much speed that 001 really has underneath it when he needs to push. And it shows you, I think, just how much these guys were holding back earlier in the race when we were seeing them run line astern.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's certainly showing the pace that thing's got and what they may have been doing earlier on as far as how they were driving and just being maybe a little bit more conservative, as you say, in regards to just trying to look after the tyres, trying to look after the fuel, not push too hard with the gap they had to the rest of the class. So very, very smart driving there, but it's very much showing that 001 has a lot of pace in it.
Yeah, it certainly does. Very, very much as... I think Miyamoto may have made an error since Escalindo is on by.
Yeah, well, not quite sure what's happened there, but there was certainly a moment at the kink for Miyamoto, and I think it was involving GTO traffic. We'll find out on the replay to see what's happened here, but that car does appear to have some damage on it.
Yeah, this was at the kink is where it happened, trying to work his way by a little bit of GTO traffic. You can see it right here, dives it into the corner a little bit and just gets himself sideways as he tries to brake to slow down for it. Oh, that is at top speed and hard into the wall. I don't think that's going to be too crippling to the car, but he certainly lost a good amount of time.
Yeah, he certainly lost a lot of time as a result of that half spin, and the right-hand side of that car not looking too terribly straight by the looks of it as far as the bodywork goes. So he'll be probably down a little bit in a straight line. Doesn't look like there's any mechanical damage, I don't think, so he might be okay there, but he'll certainly be lacking a lot of straight line now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it also looks like there's some damage to the rear wing as well, so that'll certainly throw him off. But we focus back on the battle at hand, that being between Nicholas Mukanos and Phil Lake. Lake able to keep that gap at around 0.7 of a second right now as they hustle their way around here. I anticipate the GTOs coming into the pits here about in the next 7 minutes or so. That's when we think they should reach the end. And that is actually Miyamoto there, who's going to be coming up behind them right here. There you can see the damage to that rear wing.
Yeah, you can see that right-hand side of the wing is a little bit kinked, unfortunately, and as a result, that's going to hurt him in a straight line. He's done 282 on the straight that time by into turn one, whereas before he was doing about 286, so he's a couple of kilometers down in a straight line. Not as bad as we might have thought it might have been, but still, that's going to not be too good for his fuel economy and not too good for him trying to fight against other cars.
No, it's not, and we saw a pixel-perfect race there out of Togo Hisada, and then his teammate Taiki Miyamoto getting into the car and throwing everything off. Very, very unfortunate situation there for them, so don't love to see it, but who does love to see the car right in front of him? And Phil Lake getting very aggressive there, coming over the curbing at turn 5, just absolutely chucking that car around.
Yeah, certainly throwing that thing around, certainly giving it a bit of a hustle at the moment to use some pace and use the tyres that he's got under it. Obviously, these cars are going to be a lot lighter now than they were before, so they're probably going to be a lot more manoeuvrable and a lot more easier to hustle around this sort of racetrack and not have to worry about them doing anything that you may or may not expect. So certainly not going to be leaving anything on the table at this stage, especially with how close these guys are.
No, but I've got to be thinking there, if he is running that close to the edge, that he may be susceptible to making a mistake or two. Oh, that is a commentator's curse if I have ever seen one. Very close there, as we've got a GTP in the pit lane with what looks like some pretty heavy damage.
Yeah, it looks like Christian Erebus has ended up in a bit of strife here, and I'd say maybe into turn 1. We'll see what happens. And oh, yep, that's a little bit too wide. Oh, and a heavy hit into the inside wall.
Yeah, and if that rear wing has damaged the front of that car, looking even worse here at the moment. So that is what brought him on into pit lane. Continue to watch this battle here. Phil Lake getting that gap down under 0.4 of a second. They've got a little while here before they have to deal with a lot more of the GTP traffic. So they can kind of run their own race for the moment.
Yeah, they certainly can. Pretty much have been able to all race so far as well currently, but it's going to be very, very fascinating to see what's going to happen in the pit stops still between these two.
It certainly is. Coming up behind them right now, that is one of the GTPs. That is Koivisto, the Finn who fired off the pit sequence earlier. As we see him being very respectful of this battle, recognizing that these drivers are in a fight unto themselves and not really wanting to get in the way of it. That is some good heads-up, respectful driving.
Yeah, it certainly is, to just be patient and not really force his way on through these guys, especially with how close they are racing for the lead. So nice bit of gentlemanly driving there from Koivisto to sit in behind and not really bother fighting through a corner where there might be something come undone.
Yeah, not wanting to push too hard on that as they go there. He's able to sneak his way on by nice and easy. A little bit more GTP traffic working their way around right now, trying to see if he's able to get by before Canada Corner, and Jay Dixon is able to do just that as they get on by. All right, Phil Lake continuing to stalk behind here, behind Nicholas Mukanos. This is our closest battle out on track, as Laust Olsen has been slowly but surely able to pull out a little bit of a gap on Galindo right now, so that's good news for him as they continue to go, continue to work their way around, waiting to see if anything pops off here as both drivers coming down pit lane.
Yeah, so this is the moment that we're going to find out truth and on screen here, who's going to end up coming out ahead and by how much as well. That's going to be the telling sign as to who's saved the most fuel. Both cars up on the jacks to change tyres. Both drivers staying in as well, so no driver change for either of those cars. And I believe that P3 is going to do the same. No driver change there, and tyres and fuel as well. So top three all doing the same strategy of keeping the driver in and also just taking tyres and fuel.
Yeah, looks like these hot temperatures here at Road America not really allowing for any other strat. As a reminder, it continues to be absolutely scorching there, 46 degrees Celsius out on track. That's 115 Fahrenheit. Wind's still pretty strong there as well, 10 miles an hour out of the southeast. Humidity relatively high as well. That wind is a little blustery, and here come Mukanos and Lake out of the pits. It is going to be Mukanos just by a hair.
Yeah, so still very, very close, even despite some of the fuel-saving strats going on between these two. Absolutely nothing in it after that first round of pit stops. Obviously, Mukanos coming out in front as we pretty much expected, but there wasn't really any change in gaps. So I'd say they managed to save about the same amount of fuel and burn the same amount of fuel. So no real advantage there to either driver.
No, remember, we saw Lake letting Mukanos by earlier, and that sort of precipitated all of that action that we saw. So I'm not surprised here that they were able to come out very, very close to one another. Lake now, it'll be interesting to see if he gets a little bit of a push on, or if he is going to be happy to save some fuel here for the moment. Now, that is Taiki Miyamoto coming up behind them. I think he's going to catch them at a very inopportune place on the track, unless he's able to get this move done before they go into turn 8, and it looks like he's going to get Lake, but he's going to split the difference between the two.
Yeah, just managed to weave his way on through between them there, managed to just get up the inside at the right time, and that's allowed Mykonos to build a little bit of a gap, but we know Lake's got a lot of pace in that 001 car, so would not be surprised if that gap comes back down within the next lap or so.
Yeah, certainly could be as they continue to get their way around here. That gap under a second, it holds at about 0.8 right now. And so that is good news for Phil Lake. That is still within effective draft range, and he will be happy to hear that.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what sort of gap this comes down to as well by the end of the straight. Obviously, but a couple of car lengths in it between them at the moment, but whether that draft's going to be strong enough from as far back as he is, it'll be fascinating to see. We'll see what the gap is at the start-finish line. He's obviously lost a lot of time at his Lake, but he's going to close that gap down. It's just going to start coming down now, so it is slowly coming down, but he's managed to gain 10th, so not a massive amount of differential as he runs wide on the way through turn 1, washed out on the front end, and that's allowed Mykonos to pull away just a little bit more and has basically lost everything he gained in a straight line on the way into turn 1.
Yeah, indeed he has. Oh, as our leader is off, Laus Olsen is off right now, and that is going to allow for Aitor Sintes Galindo to be able to streak on by him going into turn 7. Let's take a look at this replay.
Yeah, it looks like it wasn't too major, thankfully. No damage, no spins or anything. It just looked like he might have just gone on a little bit too deep. He went deep into the previous corner, so maybe just overheated that front corner, right front tyre, and as a result, just instead off the road. Luckily, managed to hold on to it. A little bit of a bumpy ride over the grass, but managed to get back on the track. Didn't lose too much time either, thankfully, so he hasn't ended up way too far back, and he knows he's got some pace under him as well, so he'll be pushing on to try and close back up to that lead.
Yeah, he's certainly going to try to get it, and we were seeing Laus Olsen start to streak away a little bit, so this could mean that he has just got to push here a little bit more to try to catch back up to Sintes Galindo, and perhaps if he's able to push and close that gap down, it's about 2.5 seconds right now. Maybe he's thinking about getting into effective draft range and maybe just trying to save a little bit of fuel if he catches up behind. It could change his strategy ever so slightly.
Yeah, it could very well change it up ever so slightly, and that might be all he needs as well, maybe, or maybe not. We'll have to wait and see, but this could very well be something that he may end up regretting later on. If he's made that mistake, it might hurt him, but we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, still decent pace under him at the moment, doing similar times to what he was doing earlier on in the previous stint, so he hasn't lost hasn't probably lost anything as far as pace goes, but he'll be certainly trying to push on to catch up to Sintes Galindo, and obviously by no means is slow at all as Galindo, so these two are going to be certainly doing a bit of a tussle between them as they get closer and closer together.
Yes, they indeed will. As I will say, through the first 2 sectors, it looked like Sintes Galindo was able to pull away a little bit. Olsen able to reel him back in. As we jump back to the battle between Phil Lake and Nicholas Mykonos. As you said, this battle just not dying at all. That's Jay Dixon, by the way, locked in step there with another car, but that is not for position. Jay Dixon still a lap down after that first lap incident.
Yeah, he'll still be trying to recover as well after earlier on. He's doing not too bad at the moment. Still got a lot of, still got to try and push on and get at least another lap ahead of some of the drivers if he wants to start moving up the order, but still he'll be pushing on, and still plenty of laps to go as well. Not quite halfway through this race, but we'll be pushing on.
Yeah, and this is the part with them making that pit stop when they did. We anticipate them probably needing only one more pit stop to get to the end of the race, so they may have to do a little bit of fuel saving to make sure that that happens. But Phil Lake in the catbird seat with that fuel saving right now to be able to try to hold that out as much as possible. It'll be interesting to see if he tries to make a little bit of a move here, maybe like we saw earlier with him and Mykonos, him trying to get on by him, as it were.
Yeah, so maybe wondering if something's going on between these two at the moment. Maybe they're just trying to work together, maybe not quite needing to push as hard. Maybe is Phil Lake. He's certainly got back to the back of him, but we'll see what he's going to do over the next few laps, whether he's going to push hard or just be conservative and sitting behind. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens, but just be all about trying to be smooth here, not really wanting to push too hard. The track has dropped a number of degrees as well, so it's going to be a little bit more grip for everybody, thankfully, but still going to have to keep on pushing on and try and hope that nothing happens.
And that's the real thing. We saw earlier, and we were talking about it, and indeed, we actually saw Phil Lake making that little bit of an error. If he is pushing that hard to try to keep up the pace with Mukanos, and the same goes with Nicholas as well. The both of them need to make sure that they are not going too hard. You don't want to push over the edge of the track, over the edge of grip here, of adhesion. You really have to be careful. You've got to find that fine line between pushing and relaxing, because if you push for too far for too long, you will certainly make a mistake, but it doesn't look like these two are making any here as they work their way through turn 7. Very, very conservative drive here from Phil Lake at this point. Just continues to stalk behind. He's got that gap under 0.5 of a second.
Yeah, just continuing to stalk him, not really pushing all that hard. Well, it doesn't look like he's pushing that hard, at least. He's not trying to overtake him at the moment, but still very, very close, sticking with him all the time currently. So we'll have to wait and see when he decides to make a move, if he does before the pit stop or not.
Yeah, that really will be the question, to see if he does that or if he's relatively content to just stick behind and save a little bit of fuel. I'm curious just how much Phil is saving. I'm riding on board with him right now to hear, obviously, a little bit of lift and coast there through Bill Mitchell Bend, as you would expect. Running the revs pretty high there, down through the final corner. This is where we'll really be able to tell. Keep your eye a little bit on that oh yeah, he's giving some big lifts there. Definite lifts on that rev counter as he comes up over the hill.
Yeah, so some fuel saving going on behind the wheel of that GTO at the moment. Being smart, not really doing anything untoward or silly that he doesn't need to do, so he just needs to keep on doing what he's done pretty much, of fuel saving, sitting him behind, and he'll use that to his advantage in the next stop where he'll jump him.
Yeah, exactly, and that may be part of the strategy here. I'd just be interested to see if Mukanos, as we said, does the same kind of maneuver that we saw Phil Lake do, letting him by to let him try to save a little bit of fuel himself, as that could be a strategy there that they go into. Both cutting that corner very aggressively at turn 5. Phil Lake running wide again! Oh my goodness, Phil Lake flirting with disaster.
He's certainly not doing himself any favors with those sort of mistakes. He doesn't want to be doing that too often at all, so he's certainly pushing hard. Well, he's clearly pushing hard, but he won't want to do that too many times, or he's going to end up in strife and possibly in the wall if he's unlucky enough.
He's got to be very, very careful about that. We talked about pushing over that line a little bit, as the gap has massively come down between Sintes Galindo and Laus Olsen. I wonder if Galindo has made a little bit of an error here on this previous lap. Going back to check and see right now. No, it was just a little bit of lap traffic that held up Sintes Galindo, and so now the gap between the GTP leaders is down to 1.5 seconds.
Yeah, so that traffic really hurting Galindo there, and now it's allowed Olsen to catch back up after his mistake and help ease the pain that he had earlier on where he had that mistake. So he'll be certainly thrilled with the traffic there, but he needs to keep pushing and certainly needs to not let up at all here.
No, he really can't let that up at all. He's got to keep digging here, but he looks like he's losing a little bit of time there through Sector 4. That's the fast run really from the carousel and turn 8 all the way down into Canada Corner. Able to gain up a little bit more through Sector 5 as they get on to the fast stuff here again. Trying to see if he can pull that down. The gap is now about 1.6 seconds. He wants to be closer. He wants to get that gap under about a second. That's where he wants to be, because that means he will be getting the full effect of that draft.
Yeah, he certainly will be getting the full effect of the draft now, and we continue to close that gap up, especially with the fact that Galindo's just been held up even more by traffic there on the way through turn 2, so he's going to have an even smaller gap now to deal with, whereas Olsen's going to close that gap up and be really using the draft now.
Indeed, he will, getting closer and closer here as he comes. The gap is under that crucial second. Indeed, it's about 0.5 of a second right now. So Olsen starting to push here, starting to get that move on.
He certainly is starting to get that move on a little bit wide through the previous corner and on the way down towards the Hurry Downs, trying to use all the track he possibly can, but you can see there just slightly better off the corner was Sintes Galindo. Not quite able to get the power down was Olsen, and as a result that's hurt him a little bit, but still very, very close between them. He'll have a bit of draft, so he'll be using that to his advantage to keep up and close that gap down as they go along. And you can see here is the pace differential as far as top speed goes between the two of them, and obviously lifting and fuel saving as well. I'm surprised Olsen never went for that move there. It was probably going to be well and truly clear there, and that's going to mean that he's going to get held up massively here.
Yeah, it's a big hold up there. He's going to have to wait until the final corner to get around. I believe that was the 208 that he was having to get around there of Kenatake as he gets on by, and that gap has re-expanded to about 2.5 seconds, so it was looking like a cracking battle for the lead has now re-expanded itself back out and not as close as it once was.
Yeah, it certainly isn't as close as it was before. 53.8 last time by for Olsen compared to the 52.9, so second loss there, probably, if not more actually, for both of them, to be honest, because of the traffic that they both encountered across the lap. I'd say that's probably 2 seconds of loss both as regards to traffic holding them up, so not exactly what they're going to have wanted at all in their own respects, but still a long race and still plenty of laps to go in a pit stop, so they just need to keep on pressing on. Meanwhile, the GTO still fighting as hard as ever. Full Lake has managed to get on by at some point, so he now resumes his race lead, and he did that at the final corner on the final lap, on the previous lap I should say, so looked like it was a change of position between the two of them. Not really any sort of fight there at the final corner when he passed, but change for the lead at least.
Yeah, change for the lead, and now this is going to allow for Meccano's to do a little bit of that fuel saving now, and so the two of them continuing to play this little game between the two. Remember when they came in on the last round of pit stops, the two of them did indeed pit together, so we do expect them to do that once again out here as they continue to work their way around.
Yeah, still continue to work on work around the Road America circuit, and they've got the race leader tucked up behind them, and he's going to lose some time here, a little bit of time, not too much, but managed to get on by the GTO cars, and it's allowed Olsen to close up a little bit, not massively, but just a little bit. He's going to get a little bit of draft as well down that front straight with the help of the GTOs as Olsen, so closes that gap down, brakes a little bit later, and he's now right back on the tail.
Right back on the tail, that gap not going anywhere at all. So they continue to go here, continue to just play in. Meccano's doing that bit of fuel saving, as we've seen him do time in and time out. Tuck up behind. Now this is going to be Olsen, I believe. No, excuse me, that's not Olsen. That is Arribas. That is going to be the next GTP to try to get on by them. There he goes, making that intention clear, but kicking up a lot of grass on his way to do it. That could have been very, very hairy, and indeed, there goes Arribas off into turn 5.
He nearly loops it on the trying to get going as well again, so struggling is Arribas at the moment with the way the car's possibly handling currently, maybe a lack of traction or something like that at the rear end. But here's a replay on board to see what's happening. He's gone Probably a little bit too deep on the brakes there, I'd say, and then just compression locked the rear end, sadly. So hasn't held the GTOs up at all, but certainly has held himself up, and you'll see here in a second over the curb and a little bit of wheel spin.
Yeah, a little bit of wheel spin there for him. We ride on board right now with P2 Laus Olsen, who has been able to close that gap back in again to Sinte Scalindo. It's now under about 0.5 of a second as they work their way through Bill Mitchell Bend. The fight is on here, or at least the fight to save fuel for Olsen. We don't know what his strategy is going to be, if he wants to try to save some fuel here behind the number 11, or if he is going to be in full push mode.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what happens here, whether he decides to pass or not, whether he decides to just do what he's been doing pretty much all race so far by just sitting behind and fuel saving. It'll be fascinating to see, but it's not quite close enough to get it move done at this stage, but he'll be certainly pushing on. He was about 3/10 quicker that time as well.
Yeah, it was very, very quick there as he continues to go, trying to see if there's any way to maybe get on by if he can. Lost about 0.3 of a second there on the straightaway, but under braking, able to close that back in again. This battle for P1 in GTP. We are over halfway in this race, by the way, and it is just as close as ever.
Yeah, it's certainly very, very close between these two GTP leaders at the moment. There's absolutely nothing in it really between the two of them as far as outright pace goes, so they'll keep on pushing on, but we've got to remember that there's still plenty of laps to go here. They've still got to get a pit stop out of the way as well to get on home, and they've just got to make sure that they don't abuse the tyres or do anything silly.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to worry about those tires as well. We talked about how the temperatures here at Road America are cooling a little bit. It's getting a little bit better in terms of that track temperature, but still very, very hot. 111 degrees Fahrenheit out on track. You do not want to over push these tires. You do not want to overcook them.
Yeah, and very, very easy to cook them as well with the amount of horsepower you've got just by a little bit too much throttle out of the corner or braking a little bit too late, and as a result understeering or locking it inside front. So it's the last thing you're going to want to be doing is overheating them and then struggling later on and having to wait several laps from the cool back down. So making sure you're looking after those tires and just being nice and smooth and looking after them is going to be very, very critical, especially when you get to later in this race, where you're going to have to maybe change tires, maybe not. We'll have to see how much everybody's taking in terms of fuel.
Yeah, that's going to be a real thing to see if anybody wants to try to take tires, try to take just fuel. It'll be interesting to find out what exactly is going to happen on that run, but we will have to see as these gaps continue to come down here this far into the race. Very, very close between the two GTP leaders, very, very close between the two GTO leaders.
Yeah, GTO leaders still nose to tail at the moment, still continuing to do what they've done over the last number of laps. At the moment, nose to tail. Mecanos not really showing any signs of trying to pass. He got very close on the way into turn 2 there. I maybe thought he was going to give Phil Lake a little bit of a bump on the exit, but wasn't quite ended up happening. So luckily no contact between these two just yet, but they're still very, very close between each other.
Yeah, very close, and I thought for a second there going on the main straightaway that they were actually going to have a little bit of bump drafting potentially the way they were going along and just how close they were running, but I don't think you really need to run into that as they still have a 21-second advantage right now over Kanatake and just continue to hold that out, so it's not really like they have to worry too much about it. Looks like Jay Dixon going to be the latest GTP to try to get around them. Remember, Dixon a lap down. Although he has been able to rise up a little bit. He is in P5 right now with problems from Arribas and Grant Bristow. Dixon not going to go for a move there through the kink. Not really battling anybody too seriously, so he is just going to let them go and then try to get the pass done here through the kettle bottoms as they work their way down through Canada corner. There you see that was Mukanos trying to pick up just a little bit of the draft off of Jay Dixon as they go down into Canada corner.
And we'll see both drivers trying various different things to try and get a slight advantage over the other as well, with just various different lines and various different approaches to different corners as well. You can see sometimes they run, one of them runs wide just to try and get a better exit, the other slows up and takes a tighter line. It's very, very fascinating to see the differences between the two of them and just seeing what they do different.
Yeah, and you can see how it's just a little bit of a different mentality in the way that they go at it, a little bit of different attack in it, where you want to carry the speed, where you want to carry the momentum. It's just a little bit of this way, a little bit of that way as they work their way around, but it's clearly both working wonderfully for them as they've been able to keep this gap as close as it is throughout the entire course of the race. Little bit of a poke there for Mukanos. I don't think he's going to want to have the move going down into turn 5. He's still looking like he might, but he doesn't. He decides to back off and lift a little bit there, going down into the fiddly bits.
Yeah, just being a little bit cheeky. They're getting right up to the back bumper of the leading car, Phil Lake, not deciding to make a pass, decided to just lift out a little bit and save a bit of fuel. So sitting in behind and playing the long game still is Mukanos. Lake still trying to push as hard as he can to try and get away, but it's not seemingly happening. So he's continuing to just do what he can at this stage.
Yeah, just trying to hold it out there. And remember, Phil Lake was holding on to second place through the majority of the race, so he certainly doesn't exactly have to worry about saving fuel a whole lot here as they work their way around. He's got plenty of time to be able to go and to be able to get going.
Again, just pokes the nose out ever so slightly on the way to Canada corner, but doesn't decide to make a pass. So he's being very, very patient at the moment and just trying to fill the mirrors, trying to let Lake know that he's there, still looming, knowing that if Lake makes a mistake, he's going to be there ready to pounce and take the position off him. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see Lake make a quote-unquote mistake, as we should say, at some point and let him on by to return the favour of fuel saving and setting him behind. So it'll be fascinating to see what those two do over the course of the rest of the stint.
Yeah, it'll be very fascinating to do as they go around, as they continue to work their way around. And as you can see there, Phil Lake just holding on to that top position, holding on to the way he wants to do it. Not really, I would say, giving Mukanos a chance, but he's also not closing the door on it. It's just some pretty standard running as they go.
Yeah, it really is pretty standard at this stage. You'd have to wonder what might have happened if there was one more car involved in this battle, whether they'd be being as patient as they are, whether they'd be pushing a little bit harder. You wouldn't know, but it would just be very, very interesting to see what might happen. But these two in a class of their own at the moment, and nose to tail, just working together, not being too aggressive with each other, but keeping each other honest, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think keeping each other honest is really the way to put it. They're not necessarily doing the swap back and forth that you would expect, the sort of leapfrog that you would expect on an oval circuit to try to work their way up and forward. They're just playing it a little bit safe here, letting their own natural pace dictate how much they're able to pull away. And as we've said, a 23-second gap back to Kanatake behind them, doing a great job of just keeping that pace up and being really relentless with it in continuing to grow little by little, lap after lap.
Certainly not wrong there at the moment, especially with the way it's been going between these two. Noticed as well that the lead in the GTPs is sort of changing, not really massively, but some slight advantage to Olsen in some respects. He's done some pretty decent laps compared to Galindo, but the pace is very, very equal at the moment. By no means would you want to be the one that's being chased at the moment.
No, I do not think so. I think being the chaser here is very much the way to go. Olsen very quick around here, looking very, very good. He's been able to really put the screws to Galindo when he needs to. I also want to give some props here to Taiki Miyamoto. Remember, he has that damage on the rear of the car and has only lost about 13 seconds to these drivers up ahead. Not looking like he's going to be in store for a race win here necessarily with the damage that he has, but a very impressive run with a very wounded car.
Yeah, still holding on to a podium position at the moment, and still has a decent buffer as well to fourth place of Corvisto. And be interesting to see where the Corvisto is going to be able to actually catch up to Miyamoto at some point. Obviously, there is a pace differential at the moment of 52.9 last time by, and then low to high 51s as well consistently across this stint for Miyamoto with that damage, whereas you compare that to the fourth place car, and he's doing about low 51s, high 50s on the odd occasion. So there's still some pace in that fourth place car, and if he can keep pushing as hard as he is, he might actually not fare too badly come the end of this race.
He may not indeed, but we are going to actually take a quick break here as we are 45 laps down in this 78-lap, 500-mile endurance race around Road America. The action continues to be electric in the top of the GTP and the GTO field. As we step away here for a brief moment, do not go anywhere because we will be back to bring you the conclusion of this race. Welcome back to Road America as the battle continues to be fierce here in the GTO category in the Dirty Torque Racing League. Road America 500, Nicholas Mukanos leading from Phil Lake by about 0.4 of a second. Absolutely nothing separating these drivers, even though we have about less than an hour left of racing. Absolutely incredible action. As I will also say, the GTP drivers have just started their rounds of pit stops again. Hideki Koivisto, the first driver to come on in out of fourth place. The action all is starting to fire off here, Cameron.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be starting to get closer and closer to crunch time, where it's going to be all about making sure you've got everything set up, you've got your final pit stop ready to go, and you're ready to give it absolutely 110% for the final sprint to the flag. So it's going to be very, very exciting to see what's going to happen. Plenty of battles to pan out, especially for that GTO lead at the moment, where the guys have not left each other alone all race long.
No, they certainly haven't. Nicholas Mukanos and Phil Lake just absolutely dogging each other and still running in the position that we are right now as they continue to work their way around. I anticipate here our leaders of Heitor Sintes Galindo and Laust Olsen probably to be coming down into the pits within the next 2 laps. Taiki Miyamoto behind them in the 54 machine probably within the next lap or 2 based off of the previous stints. But these guys, they've got a little bit longer to run. And as we saw in that first pit sequence, probably able to run a little bit longer than everybody else in their class, courtesy of just how much fuel saving they've been able to do.
Yeah, you're not wrong. They've been pretty much fuel saving the entire run, have those guys at the front of the GTP field. So it does not surprise me if they've been able to go so much longer than the rest of the field have been clean air and probably pushing at 110% for the entire race so far. So they've done a very, very good job to run a strategy that they have and use it to their advantage as well, especially someone like Laust Olsen, who's used the pit strategy of fuel saving to have such a good advantage earlier on. He made that mistake, but he's recovering it ever so slightly. He got help, and he's been held up by traffic as well, so it hasn't helped him one in the slightest. But still, looking at the fuel saving he's doing it consistently every single corner, every single lap. So it'll be fascinating to see what's going to happen in terms of how that lead is going to diminish for the race leader, Sintes Galindo.
Indeed it is, but right now that lead is going to be growing because Heitor Sintes Galindo setting the fastest lap of the race with a 48.535. Absolutely pushing it there. Purple through the first, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth sectors. Absolutely flying out there.
Yeah, absolutely rapid time there from him. It's pretty much on par with what he did in qualifying, actually. So he is absolutely flying at the moment. Granted, that qualifying time was on about not quite 10 degree, but about 8 degree track hotter. So certainly got a lot of pace now that it's down to 43 degrees centigrade. So it's going to be very, very fascinating to see what sort of lap times we're going to see from everybody as we get further and further into the race, and right at the end when everybody's really pushing as well.
Yeah, exactly. And just as anticipated, Taiki Miyamoto coming down pit lane right now. The driver of the 54 taking service on the car in and out rather quickly, it has to be said, as Togo Hisada is going to be getting back in that machine. So the driver who is leading through the majority of the first stint of this race getting back behind the 54. That could be a little bit of a change here in the closing stages of this race.
It very much could possibly be something we have to keep an eye on as we get right to the end of this race. But these two on screen still going at it. A little bit wider entry there from Phil Lake right out onto the runoff pavement. So trying to set up an exit there maybe, but hasn't helped him all that much. If anything, he's probably lost more time that he's gained from doing that. So not quite sure what he was trying to do there, but still pushing extremely hard of these two and doing an absolute dogfight from pretty much start to finish so far.
An absolute dogfight, and I don't know about you, but I cannot wait until the closing stages of this race when the gloves come off and these two don't have to worry about fuel saving and it can be a straight fight to the finish, because I have a sneaking suspicion that it is going to be absolutely electric fighting for the two of them. You are not going to want to miss that as we anticipate just just under about 50 minutes left to go in this 500-mile race around the historic Road America venue. Continue to watch Nicholas Mukanos here and Phil Lake working their way around. Your leaders in the GTP category still staying out. Heitor Sintes Galindo and Laust Olsen, neither of them coming down pit lane, but Galindo putting down stonking lap times. He has grown that gap up to about 6 full seconds.
Yeah, not ideal there for Laust Olsen on that previous lap or so. Got held up by a bit of traffic, and as a result, that gap has really come out. He's been putting down some very, very quick times, has Galindo, and Olsen's not really had anything for him, unfortunately. He hasn't even cracked into the sub-150s yet, so he's certainly not got much pace on him at the moment. Maybe just not quite got the tile off on him at the moment.
I may have used that a little bit up earlier on in the race, as he is... I don't know if he's necessarily struggling is the word, but just not able to match the pace of Sintes Galindo. Watching here, looks like Sintes Galindo will be able to stay out for one more lap. I anticipate Olsen probably doing the same. Indeed, so both drivers here are able to stick it out for another lap as they work their way around, able to get another good lap of driving here in before they should probably come in at the end of this current lap they're on.
What'll be fascinating is to see if either of them fuel save on this lap. Olsen does, so he's still trying to push the fuel as far as he possibly can to try and shorten that stop up. And we'll see if Galindo does as well. But these two on screen still fighting extremely hard, still working together, not really pushing each other too hard at the moment. They have swapped positions, of course, as we anticipated, but still very, very close between these two, and anybody's guess as to who's actually going to win this race, because there's been absolutely nothing between them, and the pace is about the same for either of them.
Yeah, they have just been matching each other's lap times. Looking at the last lap, for example, they were only about 0.15 of a second off one another, kicking up some dust there on the exit of Canada Corner as they work their way around. And it seems like every time that one of these drivers starts to gain a little bit of an advantage, it just swings back the other way, and Phil Lake or Nicholas Mukanos, respectively, are able to just gain back in and start it all over again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's certainly swings and roundabouts with the sort of gaps that have been happening, especially with the way that traffic's been playing out for some of these drivers, where the gap sort of increases by dramatic amounts and then it suddenly decreases by dramatic amounts a few laps later. So it's certainly been a very, very interesting race in that regard, as Galindo comes down onto the lane. So he's come onto the lane to get his final pit stop out of the way. Olsen is going to as well. So the two leaders onto the lane, and now we find out what's going to happen here.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing to sort of keep in mind with this is both of these drivers have been able to go 26 laps and then 27 laps. Sintes Galindo and Laust Olsen. Now, both of them should be able to make it to the end here, but I'm a little bit worried here if I am Hideki Koivisto, even if I'm Togo Hisada, that they may have to do a little bit of a splash and dash to get it done at the end. Looks like Sintes Galindo will be taking tires, waiting for Olsen to come to rest in his box. He will take tires as well.
Yeah, both of them going to take tires and take some fuel. Olsen's still up on the jack, so I'd say he's possibly going to be a little bit longer in the pit stall, but we'll see what happens. Still both stationary, still both waiting for the fuel to go in.
They're going to be in there for about another 10 seconds, I think, based off of everything else that we have seen. Also seeing Jay Dixon coming in behind him. There goes Heitor Sintes Galindo as he will roll out into P1, waiting for Laust Olsen to see if he was able to gain a little bit of time over his rival in the number 11 machine as he rolls out of the box. He didn't. It looks like Heitor Sintes Galindo able to gain a second in the course of the pit stops. Laust Olsen now about 8 seconds behind.
Yes, so fortunately some lost time there for your man currently sitting in P2, sadly. Not quite what he will have hoped for, and the fuel saving clearly not quite enough to help him make up some time, sadly. So do have to maybe wonder if maybe Galindo's short filled ever so slightly, but nevertheless, it's certainly not what Olsen will have wanted to be so far behind the current race leader, especially with the fact he was closing in on him.
Indeed, and you saw there briefly on your screen, as we said earlier, Togo Hasada back in the car right now. He has got a mammoth task ahead of him. 28 seconds to try to cane back up to Laust Olsen, but it did look like that the virtual pit crews were able to bang on the car a little bit and maybe fix that rear wing ever so slightly, so that car will be in a better position now as Togo has gotten back in the car. But we continue to focus here on Mukanos and Phil Lake. Anticipate them to be out for about another 6 or 7 laps or so before they will need to come in. I imagine, Cameron, these guys are going to try to take it all the way to the end of their fuel tanks before they come down pit lane.
Yeah, I imagine there's going to be by no means anyone trying to pit early, especially with how close they've been these two utilising the draft, although might not necessarily be a bad thing to come down a lap or so earlier than you typically would want to, just to try and get some cleaner and see if you can make an undercut work. But I imagine they'll both pit at the exact same time to try and just work together and try and stick with each other as well.
Yeah, and we've seen them work together as, again, it never fails to amaze me just how much dirt they are kicking up. They're on the edges of Canada Corner. They are really, really pushing these cars to the absolute limit, trying to see just how much they can take and bring them out.
Yeah, certainly leaving no stone unturned on the exits of some of these corners, flicking up that dirt, and especially Canada Corner, where they're really running right out to the edge of the road with that curb. So it's certainly using up as much track as they can at the moment to try and extract the most amount of pace they can. But at the moment, it's not really doing much for them as they're just still stuck together.
Yeah, if they're doing it to try to separate themselves out from one another, it's certainly having no advantage, but they continue to grow that gap over Kanatake behind them to the tune of now 37 seconds. So a big, big gap between those two drivers and second place. Indeed, Kanatake just now crossing the start-finish line as the two drivers here start to break down into turn 5.
Got a little bit closer there, did Phil Lake on the brakes on the way up towards the following corner, but just not quite able to get the exit they will have hoped. You literally can't separate them. Oh, very deep on the brakes there, and that's a little bit too deep for Phil Lake as he gets very, very crossed up on the way in. Manages to gather it back up thanks to the all-wheel drive that this thing has, but that was very, very out of shape and not what Phil Lake will have wanted at all, as that's cost him massively.
Yes, it has. It's cost him the tune of about a second as that gap has really ballooned out, but I don't know how Phil Lake held on to that thing. That was a little bit of rally-cross driving here in the Audi GTO. Absolutely incredible stuff from the 001.
Yeah, definitely think you couldn't ask him to do that twice, that's for sure, and have the same outcome. So very, very lucky man there to get away with that one that time. He won't be wanting to do that again at all, especially with how close it is at the moment for the lead. So he'll be hoping to try and be a little bit smoother from here on out as they continue on for at least another lap here. Going to be a couple more laps before they come down onto the lane, but it'll be interesting to see what Phil Lake has for us here in terms of whether we're going to see his raw outright pace or whether he's maybe going to decide to do something else and try and maybe fuel save or do something a little bit uncharacteristic.
Yeah, he may have to change things up here a little bit courtesy of that incident, so we will have to wait and see what Phil Lake decides to do. As you said, that change could be a big, big sea change here in this battle that we have been keeping our eyes on. All right, as they continue to work their way around Mykonos, and credit to Phil Lake here. He has gotten that gap back down to 0.7 of a second, so he's clearly still got speed in that car, continuing to push it as best as he can and really driving the wheels off of that thing.
Yeah, he's certainly driving the wheels off of it, as we saw on the previous lap, getting very, very crossed up. So by no means is he holding back, especially on this lap where he's trying to close that gap back down to the lead of the race. And he's done a very, very good job of it on this last lap as well. So clearly that 001 has some very, very good pace in it at the moment and is going to be a threat to Mukanos at the end of this race, I reckon. A little bit wide though.
They are continuing to take some very, very aggressive lines into these corners, and I don't know if that's them just pushing each other that hard or if that's by choice, but one way or the other, it is very, very tight, and I'm surprised we haven't seen more mistakes like the one Phil Lake made earlier.
Yeah, actually surprised myself as well that we haven't seen any sort of mistakes from these two either, especially with how hard they've been pushing and how hard they've been pushing each other across the entire race. So it's been very, very much credit to them both that they're pretty good drivers, that they know these cars like the back of their hand, and they know how hard you can push them and where the limit is before things start to go a little bit pear-shaped. So they've done very, very well across the entire race to be racing as hard as they have and pushing as hard as they have.
Yeah, it's a real credit to both of the drivers there to be able to get it and to get them going in that right way. Continuing to watch that battle there. Not missing much in GTP right now. The gap between Heitor Sintes Galindo and Laust Olsen is stabilized at about 9 seconds or so. And so we'll keep an eye there. But Phil Lake, right back where he was, right up behind Nicholas Mukanos. There you can see that gap comparison. Laust Olsen able to pull a couple of seconds there on the last few laps, but on lap 57, so you can imagine and see there, Sintes Galindo able to pull that gap back in. Continuing to watch here, Mukanos and Phil Lake as they go around. Phil Lake now looking a little bit threatening here. They are on lap 23 of their of their pit cycle right now. They were able to make it to lap 27 last time out. As we cross over here, this is about the 3/4 mark in the course of this race. And I know we've said this before, Cameron, but I've got to think the gloves come off and there's no more Mr. Nice Guy once these guys have made their final pit stop.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there. I think it's going to end up being pretty much a battle of who's the actual better driver and who's got the better pace. Once the final pit stop has finished, there'll be no more really any sort of silly games or cat and mouse going on. It'll be all about who's going to be the best on paper and who's going to end up wanting to win most.
Yeah, exactly. It's really going to come down to a battle of the wills between the two of them, I have to imagine, as they continue to work their way around here. It just seems like every single lap they just go flipping, flopping back and forth. Now working lap 24 of that pit stop cycle. Your leader about to cross over here to start lap 59. So we are officially 3/4 of the way done in this race. Now, they're going to have a little bit of GTP traffic to deal with here coming up behind them. But as we've seen, both of these drivers very experienced and know how to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll both not try and do anything silly here. They'll know that they'll try to lose as little time as they possibly can rather than trying to force their hand and force the GTP to possibly try and take some evasive action or do a little bit of a late move to try and get on by. And it doesn't look like it's quite going to happen just yet at this stage. Maybe on the way down towards the kink, but we'll have to wait and see. But at the moment, no real worries for them as far as traffic is concerned.
Yeah, just keeping everything nice and easy here, and that is Grant Bristow that is coming up behind them right now. So that is the driver that you see coming up behind the rearview mirrors, working his way by around the carousel there. A relatively easy pass to be done as he works his way on by and gets on by Bristow back down in 6th. He has a couple of laps down. Oh my goodness, is that That is a blink. We've lost Nicholas Mukanos.
Yeah, looks like he hasn't come back just yet, so he might be okay, but his quality is dropping quite dramatically, so we may have very well lost him, and it looks like it's going to end up being that case, especially with it's dropping just drastically. So Phil Lake's going to end up taking the lead of this race by, I don't think, a way that he would have hoped.
No, I've got to think from what we know of Phil Lake, and he is a staple in the Kamel GT series, that he would have wanted to have raced this thing to the end as much as possible. Mukanos dropping down the field. As you said, his quality absolutely dropping out here. Oh, my goodness. This is terrible for Nicholas Mukanos.
Of all the things to happen, you really couldn't have expected this, and especially as late in the race as we are, you really did want something like this if you're Nicholas Mukanos to have this happen. It's just, oh, you have to feel for the guy, especially with how well he's driven all race long and with how close he came to winning it.
I mean, he was right there, and we haven't seen a blip, we haven't seen a blink, we haven't seen a single thing from Mukanos over the course of this race, and to have him drop out like he did now, oh my goodness, just absolutely, and there it is official, he has dropped due to packet loss. Nicholas Mukanos out of this race.
Yeah, so that means that Phil Lake is going to be your race leader here, and what that does also is promotes the former third place driver of Sho Katana into second place here. So it's a bit of a change up there, as he's in the pit lane actually at the moment is second place, but Phil Lake has a massive lead now, and at this point I don't know what you do other than just pretty much cruise it home.
I think that's pretty much all you can do at this point, is just cruise it on home and try to run a pretty good, clean race here at this point. Is there's not a whole lot else that you can do. Battle's gone.
I'll tell you what though, it'll be interesting to see what he does as far as lap times go, whether he decides to maybe keep on pushing at the same sort of pace that he was, or maybe just back it off and just sort of cruise home at this stage. So don't imagine he'll do anything silly, but it'll be fascinating to see what happens, knowing that he's no longer got that pressure of having to push as hard as he has, and the fact that he's still going to make his pit stop as well. It might just be something that he does. Maybe he decides to sit there a little bit longer, or maybe not. It'll be fascinating to see what happens.
Well, and unfortunately, this isn't really going to throw off any of his pit strategy, because as we said, we only anticipate about 30 minutes left to go in this race, and the GTO is able to make it to the end on their pit cycle, no problem. So it's not like there's going to be a big difference here in pit strategy for Lake. I don't think he's going to have to worry about fuel. He can maybe just take a little bit more to be safe, but that's about all he's got to worry about.
He just really has to focus on not making mistakes at this stage, or putting it in the fence for that matter, as he pretty much can't afford to, but he sort of can afford to get held up a little bit in some places with the fact he's got no real pressure from anywhere at all. He's still going to make a pit stop, so he's not quite going to be the sort of 3/4 of a lap ahead of the rest of the class, but he's still going to have a decent gap, so by no means is he going to be able to stack it, but he's also going to at least have to keep on pushing a little bit.
Yeah, he's going to have to watch out for his six a little bit. I mean, he will be, we anticipate, probably about 3 to 4 seconds behind, or I would say probably about 30 seconds ahead of Kanatake as they get themselves back out and refocused. But yeah, as you said, he can coast it a little bit more, and you know, the GTOs aren't really one of those cars like necessarily the Lotus 79s or even the GTPs where you've got to drive them at full tilt a little bit. This isn't really a track like Bathurst where you try to back off a little bit and it doesn't really go well for you. He can take it a little bit easy and relax a little bit here from this point out.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with these longer straights as well. There's no longer a car in front of him, so he doesn't have to worry about backing off way too early. He can sort of just cruise along, brake when he wants to, lift off when he wants to, accelerate when he wants to, and just carry on doing his own little things. So he's well and truly going to be on his way to victory so long as nothing bad happens, and he has a nice clean pit stop.
Well, and if you're a fan of Phil Lake, knock on all the wood that you have that nothing bad befalls him. But we have seen a very calm, cool, collected drive from him. Focusing back up on the battle for GTP right now, Heitor Sintes Galindo and Laust Olsen. That gap continues to expand a little bit as Sintes Galindo has just been able to run a very, very good race up front, and it doesn't look like Olsen has a whole lot for him, unfortunately.
It doesn't really look like he's been able to put the pace in that Galindo has over the last number of laps. He's matching the pace now, but hasn't really had it for the rest of the stint, sadly. He's just not been able to match it in any sort of way, unfortunately. So I'd say it's probably not going to be his day, unfortunately, for Laust Olsen. But if he keeps on just putting in some nice, clean, consistent laps, he'll at least get a podium here. But if anything does happen to Galindo, he'll be there and ready to pounce.
Well, and that's got to be frustrating here for Laust Olsen. I mean, you qualified in second. You looked like you were going to be able to lead this race for a good long chunk of it. And then to have all of this happen and fall behind, that has got to be a little bit demoralizing here, and just see those gaps keep continuing to grow. That's got to take a little bit of the heart out of you as you continue to race around.
Yeah, and he'll be slightly frustrated with himself as well with that mistake he made at turn 4 when he ran wide and allowed Sintes Galindo to get on through and take the lead of this race as well after being in the lead. So there'll be a little bit of his own frustration, a little bit of frustration that he can't really have helped, such as the likes of traffic and pit strategy, and also just the general way that the car is maybe handling. So it'll be not quite what he will have hoped for as far as a result, but he's certainly not done anything bad as far as an overall result. It's still very, very good to come away with a second here, especially to not lose any positions from where he started as well.
Yeah, indeed. As there you see Phil Lake in pit lane, your leader in that GTO category, waiting here on the pit stop. We really anticipate this pit stop just sort of being a formality here for Lake, as he does not have that pressure anymore from Nicholas Mukanos behind him to keep him honest. He is going to be able to run away. Looking here to see where P2 is. Oh my goodness, P2 in the form of Kenatake just now coming through the carousel. There you can see Show as he works his way through the kink. Phil Lake back underway. He took a pretty short stop there, only 32 seconds. So Phil clearly running the strategy that he wants to.
Yeah, 4 tyres and some fuel is pretty much all he needed to do at this stage. No real drive change there, so he'll keep doing what he's done. He's actually just slipped it out of the pit lane out of turn 2.
Oh my goodness, yeah, trying to get it back. Got to be a little bit careful. That is Laust Olsen coming up behind him, but he's able to catch it and get it back under him. Let's go back and check out this replay here as we see this. Cold tires here. Coming back around. Oh, that was actually the leader right in front of him. Yeah, cold tires just took a little bit too aggressive of a line there, I think.
Yeah, I can't say I expected to see that at all with the fact he has no pressure at the moment. He's just out there on his own. So caught out by cold tires by the looks of it on the exit of the pit lane on his out lap. Very, very surprising that's actually happened considering he hasn't done it all race.
Yeah, indeed, and we actually just heard him come over the radio and apologize to Heitor Sintes Galindo there, just saying, hey, sorry for freaking you out a little bit. No harm, no foul, but that's got to be a little bit of a heart-in-mouth moment there for the leader of the race. We haven't really had a whole lot of attrition out here today. Indeed, all cars continue to be running right now as they stand, and Phil Lake just making a little bit of an errant mistake there.
Yeah, and very, very lucky to get away with that. I actually wondered if he maybe hit it a little bit harder. Well, had he hit it a little bit harder, he might have actually damaged the car and had to bring it down onto the lane again. So that would have really mixed things up in this race had it been enough to need repairs. But luckily, it wasn't too hard, and he's got away with that just enough. So he'll keep on soldiering on, but don't want to do that again, that's for sure.
No, you most certainly do not, but he'll at least be able to be okay here. Looking down the barrel at about 13, 14 laps to go here at Road America for your GTP leaders, though. That gap continuing to stay at about 13 seconds. By the way, the gap now between Lake and Kenetake is still about 35 seconds, so plenty of time there for Phil to gather himself back up and keep going.
Yeah, plenty of time with the gap that he's got to everybody else. It's lost him a number of seconds, about actually a minute pretty much. So he's been very, very fortunate to have the gap that he's had, but it's certainly not something he'll want to do again.
Oh, and Jay Dixon has had a big, big shunt going down into Canada corner. Massive, massive front end damage to that 402 machine. He unfortunately caught a little bit of the grass on the way down in and just absolutely looped it and lost it.
Yeah, that's a massive, massive accident there that he's had on the way into Canada corner. He's hit the wall at fair pace, and the front end on that car is not looking happy at all.
Trying to get the car rode back up and be able to at least bring it down pit lane right now. There you can see it. We go back to check out the replay right now. Oh, you could see that big, big damage. He just barely touches the outside corner here of the grass, breaking down into the corner, and that is enough to send him around. Massive front end impact.
Yeah, he didn't exactly hit the wall slow either. Pretty much well over 100k an hour, so it's certainly good that it's a virtual race car, not a real one, because that would have been a very, very sore impact, that's for sure.
Indeed. I hope he is not driving in VR, because I have been in that position, and you get a little spin like that, and it can certainly send you for a little bit of a loop, confuse you out a little bit. But there we watch Jay in the 402 coming down pit lane. As there is currently the 103 in Hideki Koivisto. Now, this is a car that I have some questions about here, Cam. As there you see he is gaining on Togo Hisada. But that was the question that I was worried about. We've seen Hideki come in a little bit earlier than a lot of the other drivers, and I was worried if he was going to be able to make it to the end on fuel. Looks like my suspicions were proved correct.
Yeah, so unfortunately having to make a little bit of a splash and dash to the end. It'll be fascinating to see whether he takes tyres or not here, because it's probably not going to be a lot of fuel that he needs to put into the car. So be interesting to see what happens. I don't think he's going to lose a position here, so he's probably going to be on for a solid 4th place finish if he just keeps on going the way he is. Just goes up on the jack, so he is taking tyres as well as fuel. But certainly going to be on for at least a 4th place finish here if he at least finishes at this stage.
Exactly. Now, the one interesting thing that I will say is Togo Hisada, back in the 54 machine, has been coming in like clockwork after 25 laps. Now, we've seen the leaders be able to stretch a stint out to 27. Problem is that this is a 78 lap race, so he is going to have to pull the longest stint he has pulled, or indeed any GTP machine has pulled, to be able to get to the end of this race. So the race may still be on between Hideki Koivisto and Togo Hisada.
Yeah, could very well possibly be on. Depending on what may happen, probably going to be a struggle to get enough fuel saved to get on home here, but we will see what happens. And if he does end up bringing it down onto the lane, which he more than likely will do, it'll be very, very close between those two, as there wasn't really a massive gap between them either prior to the pit stop, so very, very fascinating.
Very fascinating indeed, and there is still some speed left underneath the hood of the 54 for Togo Hisada. He went purple on the last lap in Sector 1. got held up a little bit later in the race with some later in the lap with some lap traffic, but there is still a lot of speed to be had there. So I think he knows that that potential podium is on, and he is pushing for it.
Yeah, he's certainly pushing as hard as he can at the moment to try and possibly see if he can get a podium here, with the fact he's got Koivista already out of the pits and having finished his final stop. It's certainly going to be very, very close depending on what the pace is of these two. He did a 55.6 last time by, so a little bit of traffic there, but he has been doing low 50s over the number of laps he's had clean, has Sada, so he's got some very, very good pace compared to Koivista, who's been doing 51, so if he can keep the 50s up, yeah, might certainly be on for a podium.
Yeah, certainly may indeed. He's just got to try to keep those laps there. The last one was a little bit off for him, as I said, courtesy of some lap traffic that he caught around the last part of the lap, but running some good lines here is Togo, just keeping everything together. Remember, he was the one that qualified this car on pole, led the early stages of this race, then handed the car off and had some problems for the 54 after that. But certainly looking like he is good here. Checking out his lap times this time around, looks like that 54 is going to be on pace for a very, very quick lap here. As we jump back up to Laust Olsen, continues to run about 13 seconds behind them, but Hasada not really able to gain in there. The last lap, a little bit of an outlier.
Yeah, he's lost about, done another 1 minute 55, his Hasada, so he is massively fuel saving by the looks of it and by the sounds of it as well. Isn't really pushing this car at all. He's trying everything he can to squeeze every little bit of fuel out.
You are right about that, Cameron. And well, as we said, he would have to do the longest stint out of anybody we'd seen do. And so that's probably what he's thinking here at this point, trying to pull out that 28-lap stint there, that massive time loss back to Olsen. Hideki Koivisto 50 seconds behind Hasada right now. As we continue to watch Laust Olsen working his way around. 10 laps to go here at Road America, as Olsen's chance of a victory here looking like they may be slipping away.
Yeah, the likelihood of him getting a win at this stage is starting to slowly dissipate, unfortunately, due to the fact that he's just not got the outright pace at this stage. He's done a 49.8 that time by, compared to the 50.1 that Galindo did last time by, but still it's not quite enough at this stage unless he's got that pace to be able to do over the next number of laps to close it down. But even then, it's probably still not quite going to be enough, depending on the pace that Sintes Galindo ends up doing over these final 10 laps.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to think that Aitor just has the ability to be able to control this race here at this point. And crucially here, he does have Silver Jofer that he's got to get around here in the GTOs. And then after that, he has got pretty clear running all the way up to Phil Lake. That is the only other car for about a half a lap that he has got to get by. Also, fifth place in Class 3, that's Grant Bristow behind him, I believe. Excuse me, that's not Grant Bristow, that's Christian Erebus there behind him. So this could actually work out pretty darn well here for Sintes Galindo if he's just able to eke his way by and not really have to worry too much about lap traffic.
Yeah, if he doesn't have to worry too much about lap traffic, he might be okay, but if lap traffic does end up playing into the hands of Laust Olsen, it'll certainly be something that Olsen will be hoping for, to close that gap down by any means. If that gap can close down quicker, he won't be arguing at all, and he's just taking 2 seconds out of that gap as well, so he is pushing extremely hard.
Yes, he is. A big push there, and I think Galindo got a little bit held up on the last lap. He put a 52.4 down whereas Laust Olsen continuing to run in the 49, so some definite pushing there for the 37. He's got that gap under 10 seconds. That's the first time we've seen that gap that small since the last round of pit stops, so some good moves there for Laust Olsen. He's able to get by that lap traffic a lot easier than we saw him do, but he does have to get by Hideki Koivisto, who is between himself and Sintis Galindo right now, so that could provide a little bit of wrench in the works.
Yeah, it could be 100% right there. And also to note that Sintis Galindo is also doing a bit of fuel saving as well compared to Laust Olsen, who's not really fuel saving at all. So I'm actually starting to wonder if maybe Galindo did actually short fill, I should say, and end up not taking quite enough fuel just to get out a little bit ahead. So we'll have to maybe keep an eye on this at the moment, because this could become a very, very close race for the lead.
It could indeed. So we've got two battles that we're kind of keeping an eye on here a little bit between Sintis Galindo and Laust Olsen, and then again between Togo Hisada and Hideki Koivisto. Remember, that one coming down to fuel strategy. If Togo Hisada is able to save that much fuel to be able to pull off a 28-lap stint at the end of this race. 9 laps to go, about to be 8 as your leaders cross over the start-finish line here at Road America for the Road America 500 for the Dirty Torque Racing League. Getting a little bit closer there. The gap now down to 7 seconds between Olsen and Sintis Galindo. Yeah, it is coming down.
Yeah, that's dropped massively in that last lap. It was a 49.5 for Olsen and a 52.5 for Galindo, so might be in trouble here is Galindo. Hopefully he's not too short on fuel to the point where he's not going to be able to fight this battle at all if Olsen gets to his rear bumper, but it's looking like Olsen might still just be able to get this one.
And I can report I was just riding on board there with your leader, Aitor Sintis Galindo, and he was clutching and coasting big time down into the final stretch into turn 5 off of the Moraine sweep. So a big, big problem there for him. This could get very interesting indeed. Oh, dearie dear, Phil Lake, and I believe that is Hideki Koivisto that they were trying to get on by, but that is going to be Olsen able to dispatch with Phil Lake nice and easy.
Yeah, very, very easy doings there for Olsen. No real dramas at all, and he's also going to have a little bit of drive from Koivisto as well on this lap is Olsen, so he's got that to deal with and have an advantage. But now Olsen has done a little bit of fuel saving there on the catching up to the back of Koivisto, so maybe wondering both drivers are actually short on fuel here.
Well, if they're short on fuel, Togo Hisada has got to be absolutely out of fuel pretty much by the end of this running. I don't think they can make it. 7 laps remaining here at Road America. The gap between your leaders, 5 seconds right now, as Laust Olsen doing a little bit of fuel saving there, coming down into the first corner. Not a whole lot, not nearly as much as Sintis Galindo was doing down into turn 5 earlier.
Yeah, certainly not quite as much fuel saving going on Olsen, well, with Olsen, but a lot more with Galindo. He's already lifted off, and he's not even at the point of where you normally brake. He didn't even get to the brake boards that he's lifted that early to try and do a bit of fuel saving. So he is massively short on fuel if he is lifting that early to try and save fuel here.
I mean, he's lost virtually an entire second in the first 2 sectors of this lap alone, Cameron. Aitor Sintis Galindo is in a lot of trouble here on fuel, and Laust Olsen now able to get by. That was Koivisto there that he was able to get by, so no cars in between himself and the leader right now. There you can see the gaps. It just continues to come down.
Yeah, it's just continuing to decrease is that gap at the moment. It's just going to end up nothing in it by the time we get to the very, very end of this race. Very, very possible that Olsen might even get to the lead of this race once we get to the checkered flag. So it's going to be very, very tense moments for Galindo. He'll be doing everything he can to try and save as much fuel as he can, but it's very much all about just giving it everything for Olsen. He just can't afford to let up at this stage, knowing that the car ahead is fuel saving as much as he is.
And rest assured, he will know that. He will have that relative box up to be able to tell him, oh my goodness, again, a massive lift and coast there for Heitor Santos Galindo, even before he got to the braking cones there for turn 1. So massive fuel saving still, and that has allowed for Olsen to be able to close back in a little bit more, as it's now under 4 seconds.
Yeah, so again, massive pace differential and gap drop there, but for the race lead, a 50.2 last time for Olsen, a 51.0 for Galindo, so 8/10 differential between them, and it's in favor of Olsen.
Yes, it is. The past 5 laps have all been in favor of Olsen here as they continue to go around, continue to work it down. About 10 minutes left to go, 6 laps, call it 5.5, as the leader works his way through turn 8 and onto the carousel. Again, a lot of fuel saving here for the 11 and 37, we imagine. He's picking up the pace here just a little bit, is Santos Galindo. He's able to pull out 3/10 over him in Sector 3.
He's pulled out a little bit of a gap, so maybe starting to feel the pressure and knows that he kind of really can't afford to fuel save too much. He fuel saves on the way into Canada Corner, though, does Galindo, so he's gone back to his fuel saving, maybe just trying to minimize the gap a little bit, making sure that he doesn't lose too much time this time around, at least trying to maintain that gap as best as he can. No traffic holdups there at the final corner for Galindo, and it's probably not going to be at turn 1 for Olsen, I wouldn't think.
I wouldn't think either. That's Matt Wright that they worked their way around. That is 10th overall. He is currently on the podium in the GTO category. Santos Galindo dives it down into turn 1 here. 5 laps remaining at Road America as he continues to try to eke this thing out a little bit longer. He lost a little bit of time, losing about 3/10 of a second to Olsen, and, well, that'll help him. That was Matt Wright running wide there, and Olsen not having to worry about it.
Yeah, so again, no traffic being a cause for concern for these guys so far. 49.7 last time by for Olsen, a 50.1, so a little bit less of a pace differential there between the two that last lap, but still very much in favor of Olsen, and Olsen is not letting go of this one.
No, he really isn't. He is trying to grab it, but it does look like through the second and third sectors, again, Santos Galindo a little bit faster, a little bit quicker, and able to gain the gap back out. He was able to grow and expand it a little bit more here. And now as he gets onto the higher speed sections, this is where the questions start to come into play. This is where we've seen him lose time before, Cameron.
Yeah, it certainly is the point where we've seen him lose time and massively lifting on the way into Canada Corner again, so he's by no means pushing hard at this stage, and he's just continuing to try and fuel save as much as he can.
Trying to just eke that out as much as he can here a little bit. Let's see what the gap is at the line. It looks like it's coming down to under 3.5 of a second. Let's see just how much Laust Olsen was able to gain up on that last lap. Waiting for the official as they come in. Looks like about 0.6 of a second there gained on the last lap by Laust Olsen.
Yeah, very much a massive gain again for them. So he'll be hoping to just keep on pushing. He's just got to keep on pushing as hard as he has and give it nothing left and out of it.
He's got the gap down into about 2.5 seconds right now. 4 laps to go as they go in. I think Galindo is just racing the clock here at this point. He's trying to manage fuel consumption versus the number of laps left.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be very, very close if he can't quite get there in the end, but he's just got to keep on pushing and fuel saving again on the way through the hurry downs is Galindo. Whereas Olsen just pushing at 110%. There's nothing in it. It's going to be so close.
It's going to be so very close indeed, and this is going to be a matter of who's going to run out of fuel first. We could see also a last lap duel here as they come down into these final closing laps. It'll be 3 to go at the line. Everything firing off here. The gap coming down to 2.5 seconds now. Very, very tight between your leaders.
Yeah, certainly very, very close as Olsen gets held up by traffic, and that's not what he will have wanted at all. That's going to cost him a few seconds, if not a few tenths, but still, that gap is within striking distance. If he can keep pushing as hard as he has and have some decent pace under him, it's probably going to have to be at least a second a lap difference now from here on in to get that gap back down and get the lead of this race, but he is pushing hard.
He is. Sintis Galindo starting to push back a little bit. He was able to gain a little bit in the last lap, able to gain back about 0.3 of a second, but Olsen gains it back here in the first sector of the lap. Gets a little bit squirrely there coming off of turn 3, but able to keep it nice and woed up together. They're going to cross over the sector line here. Let's see what the time is on the long straight past the Moraine sweep. It looks like Sintis Galindo able to gain a little bit. We've got a car in the pits, though. That's Silver Jofer. I believe he's had an incident.
Yeah, I think he's run out of fuel by the looks of it. There's no engine sound at all, so he's unfortunately done one too many laps on that tank of fuel and is sadly having to crawl back to pit lane.
Well, we hope that doesn't happen to our leaders here right now. Laust Olsen, the gap, it's yo-yoing at this point, Cameron. It's just coming back and forth between Sintis Galindo and Laust Olsen. It's now up to 3.7 seconds.
Yeah, he hasn't really been doing much fuel saving, has Galindo on this lap, but he's fuel saving on the way into Canada Corner. It seems to be his favourite place to fuel save, so very, very interesting strategy here. Maybe he has just enough and only needs to save in that area to bring the thing home. It's going to be close regardless, but that 3-second gap is not going to be enough if it's not more than a second that Olsen can pull.
Indeed, he is, as they cross over the line. 2 laps to go, 3.5 seconds separating your leaders in the GTP field. It is not looking great here for Laust Olsen. Galindo seeming to have found that pace again. Has he hit his numbers, or has Laust Olsen fallen down the order a little bit? Is he having to fuel save?
Yeah, I wonder if he maybe is. It doesn't sound like he is. By the sounds of it, it sounds like he's still pushing at 110%, but maybe he's just not quite got the tires left in him. Maybe he's pushed them a little bit too early, too quickly, and as a result is maybe suffering a little bit.
Maybe suffering a little bit. You can see the yo-yoing there of the times between the two of them. Gap hovering at about 3 seconds now as they work their way through the middle sectors of this lap. It looked like fractionally Olsen was faster there on those last couple of corners, but Sintis Galindo able to gain back 1/10 through Sector 3. They work their way through the carousel right now, trying to see if there's anything still left to be had. Will these drivers be able to make it to the end?
Yeah, that is the big question. Do they have enough fuel? Does your leader have enough fuel, or is he going to have to fuel save on this very last lap to get on home? He fuel saves in the Canada Corner once again, so still not quite 100% safe on fuel. Meanwhile, Olsen pushing hard, still hard on the brakes, still hard on the gas, not letting up at all to try and close this gap down. It's down to 3 seconds and yo-yoing, like you say.
Yo-yoing indeed, but it only has to yo-yo for one more lap, because climbing the hill, Aitor Sintis Galindo is about to take the white flag from Barney the Flagman, and indeed, he takes it. White flag in the air for the number 11 machine. He has just got to hold out for a little bit longer.
He's just got to hold out for one more single lap. He doesn't need to go much further than that. If he runs out of fuel just as he crosses the line, then he will be a happy man, because he's made it to the checkered flag. He's just got to make it that far, 6.5 kilometers.
It is not that far to go as they work their way, trying to go here. Listening into Sintes Galindo's machine. He is pushing to the end. He clearly thinks he is good on fuel. He is not backing down at all. He braked at the exact area, and there was no lifting and coasting going down into turn 5.
Yeah, there was no fuel saving at all from Sintes Galindo on that. On the slap so far, at least. We'll see what he does in the Canada corner, but so far it's been full push for this entire lap to bring this thing home at this stage.
Indeed it is. He's got to navigate Phil Lake, your leader there in the GTO category, does it with ease. Sintes Galindo able to get on by, pushing hard here down into the kettle bottoms for the last time. He's got a 2.7 second advantage. Will he have enough fuel to make it to the end? That is the question here. Powers the car out of Canada corner, going up to Bill Mitchell Bend. The Iberian driver here in the number 11 machine just has one more corner to go. Takes it out of the tricky final corner. Power down. Full speed ahead for Heitor Sintes Galindo. He comes to the line. No sputtering at all, a little bit of weaving, and he takes the victory here at the Road America 500. Laust Olsen, 2.3 seconds behind him, and Phil Lake, in a class all unto himself, comes home in first in the GTOs.
Yeah, well, I've probably hoped to have a little bit more of a fight to the end, but unfortunately that throughput that his rival Mukanos had has unfortunately dropped him out, so Phil Lake takes what's, I guess, an easy win here in the GTO class.
Takes an easy win here is Sho Kenatake, second place in the GTOs, coming across through Canada corner right now. Just through the last couple of corners here. He will take second overall, courtesy of Nicholas Mukanos DNF here today. The 206 coming out of the final corner right now, powering his way up the hill. Sho Kenatake will take that second place. And that is going to bring us to a quick break here on the Global Sim Racing channel, but do not go anywhere because we will be right back with the unofficial results as well as podium interviews. Welcome back to Road America. You have just witnessed the Torque Racing League's Road America 500, and it was Aitor Sintis Galindo taking victory there with a gutsy fuel-saving strategy that barely managed to see him hold out over Laust Olsen. Rounding out your podium behind him, it was Togo Hasada with Hideki Koivisto and Grant Bristow behind them. Kristen Arribas rounds out your drivers there in the GTP category with Jay Dixon, a DNF on the day.
And then Phil Lake here, winner for the GTO with Sho Kanatake on second, and then obviously the rest of your GTO field and the rest of your field, sadly a DNF for Jay Dixon and Nicholas Mikanos after that DNF. But what a race. It was absolutely unbelievable right at the end to have the leaders absolutely nothing in between them.
Indeed, and we've caught up with one of those leaders, Mr. Phil Lake, your victor here in the GTO category. After 500 miles, Phil, you've got to be happy with the win, but I think you got to be a little bit sad that you didn't get to battle it out there with Nicholas.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to the fight with him at the end, but turns out his router resets at 3 a.m, so he got unceremoniously dumped from the server.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that battle between the two of you. I mean, how much of that was sort of coordinated and formation flying, and how much of that was you guys just going at it?
We weren't taking any risks, really. Obviously, after the final pit stop, it would have been a full-on battle, but yeah, in the early stages, we were just... I mean, we had a little bit of side-by-side at the very start of the race, and then we sort of settled into the just clocking enough laps, really, and trying not to take each other out. So, yeah, I mean, we would have had a good battle. It was a fun race anyway, but it was a shame he got disconnected.
Well, talk to me a little bit about how you feel running a 500-miler like this. We're obviously used to seeing you run these cars in a little bit of a shorter stint out there. Anything different you did to train, and how do you like it?
You have to do a little bit of setup work. Usually with the car, over 40 minutes, it doesn't change too much, but you really notice over the over a longer race like this, where you're going from full tank to empty, you get quite a lot of extra rake. The rear of the car really comes way up in the air as the fuel burns off. So when you then pit and get new tires and fill up with fuel, the car feels totally different. Actually, it caught me out at one point. I just came out of the pits and then immediately had a spin. So other than that, it's pretty much the same. There was a bit of fuel saving going on, but the race length didn't really lend itself to any kind of fuel saving strategy.
Gotcha. Well, Phil, a victory here has got to feel good. Anybody you'd like to thank for the win?
Just all my teammates, and obviously you guys for doing the broadcast.
We are more than happy to do it when you guys put on a show like that. Thank you so much. That was Phil Lake, your victor in the GTO class. And now, Cameron, I believe you've caught up with our victor in the GTP class, Aitor Sintis Galindo.
Yeah, certainly. It was a very, very nerve-wracking time right at the end there with how much fuel saving you were doing there. But nevertheless, a very, very good race for you.
Yeah, it was a very, very... eventful race, even though it was a lot of fuel saving. So yeah, well, it wasn't actually intended to save fuel, because the yesterday's race, even though it was a huge saving fuel, I thought maybe it's not worth it at all. But after seeing Togo and Laos saving a lot of fuel, gaining a lot on the braking zones, it was like, okay, change of plans. Save fuel as much as you can, and try to save a lot of fuel. Actually, I overextended the second stint, because in the GTP, if you don't save, it's 25 laps of fuel, but we actually made 27, Lost and me on the second stint. So yeah, we saved a lot of fuel. And well, it was worth in the end. So yeah, I'm very happy with the result, of course.
Now, obviously, right at the end, when you were fuel saving quite a bit in a couple of places right at the end in that final stint, was that down to just not taking enough fuel in that final stop, or was it just primarily just down to the fact that the fuel burn in the car was so big, and based on the number of laps you had left, you had to save fuel, or was it just how it all was?
It was mostly, let's say, yeah, I took in the whole tank of fuel, of course, but when I was 10 laps to go, it was like, wait a second, let's check out the fuel. I might not have enough to finish the race, so I was like, okay, again, let's go back to same fuel, lift and coast, do whatever you can. Actually, 30 seconds to Laos. It can go it can go away, no problem. As long as I finish, it's better to finish than not finishing. So yeah, it was pretty much a slight miscalculation, but in the end it was like I saved enough to finish the race. So in the end, good for me.
Yeah, certainly. Still, a victory is a victory, as they say, and very much a good result. Well, before we let you go, just any thanks and any shout-outs you want to give?
Yes, of course, you guys at GSRC with amazing broadcast. I'm looking forward to replay today. The Kamel community, my family watching, and my team is at iRacing, who they will be very happy to celebrate this result with me.
Well, there you have it, DJ. Very, very happy race winner in Aitor Sintescalado, and I believe you have Laust Olsten standing by.
I do indeed, Laust. I have to ask you, man, those last couple of laps, it looks like you were pushing everything out of the car. You've got to be happy with the second, but so close to that P1.
Yeah, that was that was full push all the way, but it was too little, too late. Aitor did a great race. Perhaps if I hadn't done a few mistakes during the race and let him get that bigger lead, then it would have been closer. But yeah, I'm pretty happy. It's the first time I really have gone through a race with this amount of fuel saving. So I was learning all the time, and that was quite satisfying also to be able to do that. Just previously I would have gone full out all the way and taken the extra pit stop, but this time I decided to try to play the fuel game like the others, and that worked pretty good. So I'm happy. Yeah.
Well, how much was that fuel saving in your mind throughout the entire race? We heard Aitor sort of talking about how in the last stint he was really starting to think about it. Were you doing a lot of it there, or what?
The first two stints I was fuel saving quite a lot, and halfway through the first stint I started to clutching also to save more fuel. The last stint I wasn't aware exactly how much I could speed up. So for the beginning of the last stint, I also saved like I did the previous stints, and then from 15 laps to go, I think I only did lift and coast a few spots, and then the final 5 laps was full throttle all the way. But that was too little too late.
Well, how do you like it? I mean, you said it was kind of a fun challenge for you. Do you like the endurance element, or do you like the sprint races better?
I'm probably more of a sprint race guy. In these endurance races, too much to think about, so that's quite a challenge. But it's fun to try, and I don't think I'm nowhere near as good as some of the other people racing here. But it was. I was quite surprised by being able to pull it off. I didn't really believe in it to begin with, but after the first stint, being able to push it that far made me believe in it. So yeah.
Well, fantastic, my friend. We hope to see you out for a couple of more Enduros, but anybody you would like to thank for the run today?
Yeah, congratulations to Ita and Phil with the victories. Great races they did. And then big thank you to Phil Lake for organizing and setting up this on these two Road America 500 races. And then big thank you to you also for the great broadcast you do.
Well, I know we are more than happy to do it, Lars. Thank you so much, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
That was Lars Olsen, your second place finisher in the GTP category. And well, folks, that's about going to wrap things up for us here on the Global Sim Racing channel. But before we go, we would like to thank the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed here on your screen. We'd also like to remind you to go check out the Majors Garage, home of free Baseline Plus setups. Just go ahead and click that link in the description below or use our promo code MajorsGSRC to get 10% off. It is fantastic stuff. But as I said, thanks to the companies that provide the software and hardware for the broadcast listed here on your screen. An additional thanks go to June Lalonde, who provides our wonderful music. Check out her Bandcamp to check out more of her awesome work. Thanks to the team today, Cameron, Rob, and Dougie. You can find out more about GSRC at globalsimracingchannel.com or through our social media listed on your screen. Also, please check out our merchandise store at gsrc.storenvy.com. We keep a link in the description below as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a moment here on GSRC. We also have upcoming races listed here on your screen, so check them out and mark them down on your calendars. Next up, in just a couple of hours' time, it will be the European Majors for the Oran Park Grand Prix and the vintage V8 Supercars, the legacy one, so you're not going to want to miss that. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.